Welcome to Fusion Fantasies, where I turn the light novels I love into audiobooks free, copyright safe, and made for you to enjoy. No frills, just stories. Got a novel in mind? Drop your suggestions, and it might just become the next audiobook. Now, let's dive in. 21 Chapter 21 Chapter 21, The Little Divine Doctor. Late at night, Chuan sat on the stone slab in the courtyard and looked up at the sky. The stars in the sky and the occasional black clouds of wild birds formed a beautiful picture. I should use the gene reagent. After thinking for a long time, he finally made this decision. This body was too weak. Not only was he plagued by illness, but he was also born with incomplete meridians. In a world of martial arts, how painful was it to not be able to practice martial arts? Although in the reincarnated world, after using this medicine, it would have no effect on Chuan in the origin world. However, for the sake of the final rating, he decided to go all out. In any case, he had the deduction notes. One day, he would be able to create his own gene reagent. It wasn't considered a waste. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He gulped down the gene reagent. A warm feeling spread throughout his entire body. A power that he had never felt before gradually spread throughout his body. It was like flowing water, flowing through his limbs and bones. After an unknown amount of time, Chuan suddenly opened his eyes. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes. At this moment, he felt that his brain power was even stronger than his first reincarnation. Countless memories came flooding in. The originally unclear content became extremely clear. The most important part of it was the theoretical knowledge of infectious diseases that he possessed during his last reincarnation. For a time, the plague that was now rampant in the countryside was as simple as treating a cold in his eyes. However, the sanitary conditions of this era were restricting his ability to perform. There was no microscope or medicine here. If he wanted to get rid of the plague, he had to start from the medical path that existed in this world. Chuan aimed his gaze at the Buddhist scripture pavilion in the temple. Although this place was dilapidated, there were times when it was glorious. There were many books in the temple, so there should be something he needed. After walking around, he found the book 100 Herbs Prescriptions. This was a book that recorded how to use herbs to treat diseases. It listed the medicinal effects of hundreds of herbs. Whether it was right or wrong, Chuan had to verify the details himself. His idea was to combine several herbs with different medicinal effects, and after refining and boiling them, he would get similar effects to modern medicine. It sounded like a fantasy, but with the deduction system, it wasn't difficult to do it. It was just a waste of time. Now that his brain had greatly improved, he could accept it. During the deduction, he obtained many pill formulas that might be effective. After that, he did a second deduction. You consumed Giwan powder and died of poison 3 days later. You consumed Mafi eye soup, nothing happened. You consumed Sanhua dewdrop pill, your condition improved significantly. You recovered completely after a month. Very good, I found it. The only thing left to do was to collect the medicinal herbs. Now that he had consumed the gene reagent, his physical fitness was already above that of an ordinary person. Although he was only 7 years old, he was no less than an adult in terms of strength. Therefore, he went up the mountain alone with the only sickle in the temple to pick herbs. In the beginning, he had a full harvest. But as he continued to explore, the herbs needed in the vicinity became less and less, so he had to change his mind and start practicing medicine in a nearby town. Making money. This way, he could directly go to the city to buy ready-made herbs. Unfortunately, the idea was very good, but the reality was very harsh. Who would believe that a fart-sized child was practicing medicine? After a few days of neglect, Chuan thought of a way. He found a piece of white cloth, wrote a line of words on it with coal, and hung it on a bamboo pole. When practicing medicine, he placed it on the side as a sign. This time, not long after, someone stopped. The divine doctor descends to the world, and all kinds of diseases are not a problem. If the medicine doesn't work, won't take a cent. The passerby looked at the signboard and silently chanted. He could not help but laugh. He looked at He Chuan and said, "Hey, kid, did you say that you are the divine doctor? You can cure all diseases? Is it true? Whether it's true or not, we will know once you go up and try." He Chuan sat cross-legged on the ground. He did not even open his eyes. He looked like an expert. This person hesitated for a moment before he finally made up his mind. "All right. Let me see how capable this so-called divine doctor of yours is." He squatted on the ground and stretched out his right hand. "Come, check my pulse." Unexpectedly, He Chuan did not move at all. After taking a look, he casually threw out a piece of cloth with a series of medicinal ingredients written on it. It looked like a pill formula. External application. A young but indifferent voice came out of his mouth. The passerby laughed. "You're so young yet come out to cheat people? I don't have any external injuries on my body. How can I apply external application?" His voice was very loud, causing many people to gather around and stop in their tracks. A group of people who did not know what was going on also saw the white cloth hanging on the bamboo pole. Those who did not know how to read would ask someone who knew nearby. As a result, they all knew that the child in front of them claimed to be the divine doctor, and now he had been slapped in the face. For a moment, there was a flurry of discussion, and everyone blamed the child for what he did. However, He Chuan's expression did not change. "This medicine was not prescribed to you." The passerby found it funny. "If it wasn't for me, then who did you give it to? Could it be that there was a second person who came to you for treatment?" He Chuan pointed at the yellow dog that was following behind him. "I prescribed this medicine to it." This time, the onlookers laughed and felt that the child was starting to be unreasonable. "You came to me for treatment, but in your heart, you did not feel that my medicine was usable. You were worried that you would be poisoned by the medicine, so you changed hands and used this medicine on the dog by the roadside." He Chuan suddenly opened his eyes and looked straight at the passerby. He asked in a more serious tone, "Yes or no?" The passerby's expression instantly changed, and he couldn't say a word. How did this child know what he was thinking? The onlookers couldn't help but become curious and asked one after another. In the end, the passerby nodded with great difficulty, which surprised everyone. In order to verify He Chuan's words, someone took a trip with the prescription and really made the medicine. Then, he applied it to the yellow dog's festering wound. Not long after, the yellow dog that was lying on the ground and whimpering could actually stand up. This time, everyone was shocked. Could it be that this 7 or 8-year-old brat in front of them was really a divine doctor? People in this era were still somewhat ignorant. When they encountered things that they could not understand, they would always attribute it to things that were fantasized like gods and ghosts. He Chuan also used this point to quickly build his image and raise his prestige. Very soon, an old woman dragged her hunched body forward to seek medical treatment. He Chuan saw that she was pitiful, so he gave her a prescription for free. After going back and giving it a try, it really worked. Thus, in the days that followed, He Chuan's path of practicing medicine became smoother and smoother. It didn't take long for the little divine doctor's name to spread, directly making him the most famous person in the nearby villages and towns. Social status rising, the divine doctor achievement has been unlocked, the evaluation points have increased slightly. 22 Chapter 22 Chapter 22, Self-Created All-Purpose Cultivation Method, Tyrannical True Cultivation Manual. As He Chuan's reputation soared, he also received his first bucket of gold. With this money, the people in the temple could be saved. If he could get rid of the plague, he might be able to obtain another wave of evaluation points. Perhaps, there would be high-ranking officials and tycoons who heard of his reputation and would spend a large sum of money to invite him to treat his illness. However, wealth cannot save one's life, and medicine cannot change one's fate. In this world where martial arts were revered, medical skills and money were not a big deal. Therefore, after He Chuan bought enough medicinal herbs to treat the illness, he began to study martial arts. There were many books in the Buddhist scripture pavilion, and martial arts techniques were among them. Moreover, they covered a wide range of aspects. According to the classification of this world, it was generally divided into two parts, internal strength and external strength. The so-called external strength was also known as Chinese boxing skills. It leaned towards fighting techniques, and when paired with the corresponding weapons, the power would be even stronger. This type of martial arts specialized in body techniques, and some specialized in body refining. There were all kinds of martial arts and all sorts of different types. As for internal strength, it was very simple. The people who cultivated internal strength all used the unique methods of their mental cultivation methods to absorb the energy between heaven and earth. Then, they would store this energy in their bodies and control it to produce a huge amount of lethality. Looking at these cultivation methods that each had their own merits, He Chuan was not very satisfied. The books in the dilapidated temple were a little low level. According to the classification of this world, they were all entry-level martial arts, so learning them would not be very powerful. Even if they were cultivated to perfection, they would only be third-rate warriors. If they encountered the weakest second-rate martial artist, they would probably be instantly killed in a few moves. The growth rate of martial arts was obvious. This wouldn't do. He Chuan clearly understood the crisis that he would face in 2 years. If he was only a third-rate martial artist, he would probably have some difficulty even protecting himself. In the end, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape the ending of death. He had no choice but to create his own martial arts. To be more precise, he had to merge all the martial arts manuals into one martial art that was both internal and external. This was a field that no one had ever tried before. Hence, it was extremely difficult to implement. As a result, he, who had the deduction system, was making slow progress. However, it was not completely hopeless. After hundreds of thousands of deductions, he finally found a feasible path. Half a year later, a martial arts technique that covered body technique, mental cultivation, weapons, body refinement, and more than a dozen other martial arts directions appeared out of nowhere. He Chuan named it the Tyrannical True Cultivation Manual, Lower. It was a simple and clear name. The reason why it had a suffix of lower was that he had divided this martial arts technique into 3 upper, middle, and lower, which corresponded to the 3 levels of a martial artist. At present, the martial arts knowledge he had obtained in the ruined temple's Buddhist scripture pavilion was only enough for him to deduce the most basic part. If he wanted to continue deducing, he had to summarize the experiences of the previous people and read more martial arts books. Unfortunately, he did not have this condition now. However, with the special nature of this cultivation technique, once it was successfully cultivated, there would definitely be no opponents within the same level. This was He Chuan's prediction. But it was also the result of his deduction. There was no other way, the Tyrannical True Cultivation Manual was too comprehensive. For ordinary martial artists to cultivate a cultivation technique, they would need at least more than 10 years to have some small success and barely make it into the third-rate cultivator. Whether it was internal or external martial artists, it was the same. A person's life was less than 100 years. How many 10 years could there be for a person to cultivate a new martial arts technique? Therefore, if one wanted to become a second-rate or even a first-rate martial artist, one could only continue to explore and move forward in one direction. If one threw out the Tyrannical True Cultivation Manual, which could cover all directions, perhaps even the most talented martial artist would not be able to complete the lower part after decades of cultivation. After all, the more complicated the cultivation method was, the easier it would be to make mistakes during the cultivation process. At that time, one would have to repeatedly revise it. This was the most time-consuming thing. However, He Chuan was different. The deduction system could help him find the best cultivation method and greatly increase his efficiency. As a result, in just 3 days of cultivating the tyrannical true cultivation manual, he had already achieved the ability to draw qi into his body, allowing him to control the energy unique to this world. In less than a month, he had achieved a small success and entered the third-rate cultivator. If the martial artists outside were to see such a terrifying efficiency, they would probably exclaim in shock. To be able to do something that others could only do in a few years or even more than 10 years in a month, was no longer something that a word genius could describe. Moreover, He Chuan had just turned 8 years old. Days passed day by day. While He Chuan's martial arts were growing day by day, the patients in the temple were also gradually recovering because of the medicine he brought. However, this process was a little long. After all, it was an ancient world, and the sanitary conditions were really too poor. In addition, the dilapidated temple was not big, to begin with. And everyone meets each other every day. It was impossible to isolate and treat them, and they did not have such a concept. Therefore, the illness kept repeating and did not completely recover. It was not until 2 years later, when He Chuan was approaching the age of 10, that the plague finally subsided. In the eyes of these ignorant villagers, such a feat was no different from a miracle. Everyone regarded He Chuan as the reincarnation of the living Buddha. He could not bear to see the suffering of the world, so he came down to save them. He Chuan neither admitted nor denied it. Hearing the news that the evaluation points in the reincarnation mark had increased again, he did not think it was a bad thing. Ignorance also had its benefits. At least, there were many things that he did not need to explain. Without having to suffer the illness, the ordinary people naturally missed the days at the foot of the mountain. Hence, at this time, some people began to want to go home and look for their relatives who they had been separated from by the plague. At the same time, they went back to make some preparations to repay the abbot monk and He Chuan who had taken care of them. The opinion grew louder and the abbot finally agreed to take them down the mountain and asked He Chuan for his opinion. "Master, you guys go. I'll stay and watch the temple." He Chuan saw that they wanted to persuade them again and said, "There is no God in an empty temple. If no one is left, there will be no God to protect the temple in the future." These words really worked. They did not insist and left under the leadership of the monk. Only He Chuan was left to guard the empty door. He stood on the stone platform outside the ruined temple and looked at the group of people who were walking further and further away. In his mind, he recalled the outcome of the simulation of the heavenly Dao simulation and could not help but sigh. "I can't change your decision. Sigh, I wonder how many people will come back alive in the end." 23 Chapter 23 Chapter 23, Shocking Change. Zhang Wenayu's experience was a constant reminder to him. He Chuan knew that without absolute power, he could not change the future that he knew. He shook his head and walked back to the temple to continue cultivating. In the blink of an eye, the sun had set and dusk had fallen. "I've finally succeeded." He Chuan let out a long breath as a sharp light flashed in his eyes. After 2 long years, he had finally cultivated the tyrannical true cultivation manual to perfection. This meant that he had already become the strongest third-rate martial artist, without a doubt. Even if he encountered a second-rate martial artist with average strength, he could still exchange blows with the other party. Although he might not be able to defeat the other party, he would not be defeated easily either. This was the effect of the tyrannical true cultivation manual. It could cross realms to face the enemy. This was because he was different from ordinary martial artists who only took one martial path. After He Chuan obtained inner qi through internal strength cultivation, he used his deduction ability to directly use inner qi to temper his body, muscles, and bones. This allowed him to possess the overpowering destructive power of an internal strength cultivator, as well as the various offensive methods of an external strength cultivator, as well as a strong physique. Cultivating both inner and outer aspects was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. What was the big deal about fighting enemies across realms? If this cultivation method were to be spread out, it would definitely shock countless people. After all, in everyone's understanding, inner chi could not be controlled. It could only be stored and then used to harm the enemy through guidance. There was a time when it was not that no one had tried to use inner chi to temper their bodies. But without exception, all of them were torn apart by the powerful energy. Since then, the martial artist had been split into two. Although both of them could have more powerful strength, facing the threat of death, there were not many people who wanted to try. He Chuan was the only person in the world who had successfully combined the two. Unfortunately, such a great achievement could not draw the hint of the reincarnation seal. It seemed that no matter how powerful the technique was, if no one knew about it, there was still no way to obtain evaluation points. He Chuan stood outside the temple once again. He looked in the direction where the abbot and the villagers had left with a profound gaze. Looking at the time, they should have arrived by now, right? At the same time, outside the grass temple village, the villagers who had been imprisoned for a few years and regained their freedom were chatting and laughing along the way. "We're finally home. After eating wild vegetables for so long, we can finally improve our food." "Hey! You are still thinking about food? If the divine doctor didn't save you, would you be able to come back?" "That's right. Shouldn't we prepare well and bring the little divine doctor back to the village before talking about other things?" "Hey, right. I'm sorry. Look at my brain, I'll go back and prepare now." "Wait, something doesn't seem right." The abbot monk held a bracelet made of Buddhist beads and looked around strangely. "Why aren't there any guards here? Shouldn't they be here to check on the people coming and going?" "Maybe it's because of the plague, so they left." One of the villagers shrugged nonchalantly. "Just in time, we won't have to explain." "Yeah, it's getting late. Let's go back and clean up." Another villager nodded and echoed, "Later, get Dan who had quick steps to take a chicken with him to send the abbot up the mountain. Let the little divine doctor have a good meal first and then pick him up tomorrow." "Okay." The young villager named Dan immediately responded. The abbot monk was still a little uneasy, but he didn't say anything else. Dozens of people turned around and approached the village. A few villagers who lived near the village entrance shouted their family names as they walked into the house. In the end, they opened the door and saw that it was empty inside. "Eh? Where's my wife? Xiao Hua? Where's my girl? Why isn't she at home? That's strange. There's no one at my house. Could it be that they went out? It's almost night. Where else can they go?" At this time, a group of people also realized that something was wrong. In the past, smoke would rise from the top of every house at this time. However, it was so quiet today. Even the big yellow dog that barked at everyone at the village entrance was nowhere to be seen. Moreover, with the breeze blowing, there was a faint smell of blood. A rough voice was heard. "Ha ha ha ha, the little girl in this village is really pretty. Look at her figure, look at her face. She is even more attractive than the women in the brothel. She looks like a virgin. She is so pure. Boss will definitely like such a good woman. Damn, I can't stand seeing her like this. Hurry up and bring her to the boss. Who knows, when he's happy, he might even reward us after playing with her." Such a conversation made everyone scared. They quickly quickened their steps and rushed in the direction of the voice. In the end, they were still a step too late. The square in the middle of the village was already littered with corpses. Their relatives and friends had all been killed by the knife. There was blood everywhere. The severed heads and limbs were mixed together and piled up randomly. There were old people, women, and even a few months-old baby. Not only that, there was a temporary torture rack made of wood on the side of the square. There were more than 10 young men hanging on it. Without exception, they had all lost their lives. Moreover, they had their fingers cut off cruelly, their tongues and eyes dug out. Even their abdominal cavities had been cut open, and their internal organs and intestines slid out of the wounds and hung on their thighs. It was hard to imagine what kind of torture they had suffered before they died. 24 Chapter 24 Chapter 24, I want them to pay with blood. The initiators of all this were a group of bandits. Now, they had already plundered all the valuable things in the village, gathered all the women who were still somewhat beautiful here, and played with them wantonly. At this moment, the girl had already been escorted by a group of bandits to the front of their leader. She was completely naked. Her snow-white skin was exposed to the air. The bandits continued to jeer. They let their leader violate the poor girl in front of everyone. Xiao Hua! The girl's father shouted angrily, "You bastards, let her go!" Oh! The bandit leader had already noticed them, but he didn't care about these villagers. He laughed lightly and roughly opened the girl's legs, taking out the ugly thing beneath him. He ignored the girl's struggle and wailing. Under her father's gaze, he ferociously charged in. "No! I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you!" The girl's father cried out in grief, picking up the brick on the side, and was about to go forward and fight with his life. The people beside him hurriedly stopped him. Facing this group of vicious people, wouldn't rushing up equal to courting death? Amitabha! The abbot chanted a Buddhist chant, sighed, shook his head, and took 2 steps forward. Just as he was about to say something. In the end, a bandit suddenly rushed over with a long knife in hand. A cold light flashed past, and the abbot's head was directly separated from his body. Amidst the spraying of fresh blood, the round head fell to the ground. The villagers were all stunned. The abbot master was dead? The bandit leader looked at the rolling head on the ground, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. He slowly straightened his waist. "You want to kill me? Hee, kill the other as well. Oh no, leave this girl's father behind, and let him see how his daughter serves us." The young girl beneath him had already lost all hope, and there was no expression on her face. The bandits laughed loudly and approached with all kinds of weapons in their hands. "Run!" It was unknown who shouted. The dull villagers suddenly came to their senses and hurriedly fled in all directions. But at this time, they realized that the bandits had already occupied the entire village. There were bandits everywhere. There were so many of them that there were no less than 1,000 of them. They had been able to enter the village successfully. It was probably because the bandits had let them in on purpose. To escape at this time was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Fortunately, there were a few families that had a cellar in their house. It was especially used to store grain, and there was a tunnel that led out of the village. It was exactly because of this. A few people took advantage of the chaos to escape the encirclement of these bandits and successfully escaped. Unfortunately, most of them were left inside. One of them was the girl's father. One could imagine what kind of mental torture he would experience. Seeing his daughter being humiliated by this group of animals, he probably even wanted to die. But the villagers who survived were very clear in their hearts. That group of bandits would definitely not let him die easily. What should we do? The village is gone, there's no place to go now. Why don't we report it to the officials, and let the officials come over to settle it? Are you stupid? That dog county magistrate won't care about our lives at all. That's true. Sigh, we've been locked up in the temple for so many years and never sent anyone over to see the situation. They must think that we're sick and dead. Let's go up the mountain and bring the news to the little divine doctor. Let's move to another place and take good care of him. I think it's fine. Should we leave now? Let's go. While it's dark, no one can find us. After the discussion, a few villagers made a decision. They returned to the mountain overnight and brought the news to He Chuan. When He Chuan heard it, he was first stunned before he flew into a rage. Bandits? They killed Master. Although he knew that this group of villagers would be in danger if they went out. He was also mentally prepared for the abbot monk not to return. But when things really happened, He Chuan still could not suppress the anger in his heart. A few villagers suddenly felt that He Chuan seemed to have changed into a different person. An indescribably powerful aura was released from his thin and small body, making everyone present unable to breathe. They watched with their mouths agape as He Chuan picked up the Buddhist monk knife at the corner of the wall and casually swept it. In the next moment, a sharp blade aura flew out and swept across the entire courtyard. For a moment, booming sounds rang out one after another. By the time the dust settled, there were already no intact objects in the field. Whether it was trees or stone pillars, they were all turned into dust. He Chuan looked at the scene that he had personally created and had a rough understanding of his own strength. His eyes narrowed slightly. I want them to pay with blood. The surviving villagers were stunned by this move of his. However, after hearing what he said, they hurriedly stopped him. The little divine doctor, you can't do it. There are probably over 1,000 of these bandits. You're just a child, how can you deal with them? Speaking up to this point, the voice of the villager also weakened. They didn't know what to do. After all, this was the little divine doctor, a living Buddha who descended to the mortal world. If he could cure people, then he could definitely kill people. Looking at the messy courtyard, they swallowed the second half of their words of dissuasion. Just because they couldn't defeat them didn't mean that he couldn't. You guys wait here, I'll be right back. He Chuan's voice became very cold. He didn't care about these people anymore and walked down the mountain. When he came to Grass Temple Village and saw the horrifying scene with his own eyes, the anger in his heart soared. There were several young couples among the villagers who went down the mountain today. Except for them, all of their heads were chopped off. They were hung on the branches next to them like trophies. Those who survived were worse off than dead. The man was tied up and his tongue was cut off. He could only watch his wife being pushed to the ground by the bandits. They took turns to humiliate her, but he couldn't say a word. All he could do was whimper. The women on the ground had lost the light in their eyes. At the same time, they were being played around by the bandits, but there was no reaction. They were like dolls. 25 Chapter 25 Chapter 25, Massacre. The worst was Xiao Hua's father, who was in the middle of the crowd. He Chuan knew this man. He was a simple and kind-hearted honest man. Usually, he would smile at anyone he saw. But now, he was held up by the bandits and forcefully assaulted his dead daughter. The bandits still looked very excited. From time to time, they would ask him if he was comfortable and if it was fun to play with his daughter's body. He Chuan couldn't hold it in any longer. He didn't say anything. He rushed into the crowd with his Buddhist monk knife in hand. His powerful inner chi was attached to the blade. Even if it was just a casual swing, he could condense a sharp saber chi and sweep them all out. The bandits died upon contact. They didn't even notice it. Suddenly, they found that their line of sight was slowly moving forward, and they suddenly fell to the ground. They tried to look back, only to find that they had been cut in half, and their internal organs were scattered all over the ground. What was even more ridiculous was that their two legs were still standing in the same place. For a moment, miserable cries rose and fell. The bandits stopped their evil deeds one after another and looked in their direction at the same time. They saw a 10-year-old child stepping on the minced flesh of their companion as he slowly walked forward. He was holding a sharp knife tightly in his hand and was covered in blood. He looked like a demon from the netherworld. When everyone saw this scene, they were first shocked and then confused. They were shocked that their companion had suddenly died. They were confused. Where did this child come from? Could it be that he killed them? That was impossible. How could this kid have such great abilities? The bandit leader also noticed this strange situation. He frowned and stood up from his seat. He shouted, "Who are you?" "I'm the one who killed you." He Chuan replied calmly. He waved his hand again, and the sword chi spread across more than 10 meters. This time, many people were already on alert, so they retreated a lot in advance. However, there were still a few unlucky people standing in front. Although they tried to block with the weapons in their hands, they only heard a sharp clang sound and were cut into two halves, along with their knives. More than a dozen bodies wailed on the ground. He Chuan did not execute them immediately. The people who were cut in half would not die for a while. Even their minds would still be very clear. They could only watch themselves lose their life bit by bit and welcome death in despair. This was also He Chuan's goal. Since you have done such a heartless thing, I will not let you have it easy. When they saw He Chuan kill people with their own eyes, even if the bandits were full of questions, they knew that he was not friendly. Almost at the same time, hundreds of people attacked at the same time, waving all kinds of weapons at the 10-year-old child. In the chaotic battle, nothing could be seen clearly. No matter how bright the bonfire was, it could not shine on the figure that was drowned in the sea of people. He's actually an internal martial artist. The bandit leader's gaze was deep. The reason why he could become the boss was naturally that he had the ability to convince the masses. As the only existence among the bandits who was a martial artist, he recognized the power that He Chuan used at a glance. Although he didn't want to admit it, he knew it clearly in his heart. This kid's strength was definitely above his. To be able to release such a long sword chi, his inner chi must have been cultivated to the peak of a third-rate martial artist. Perhaps, he was already a second-rate martial artist. Facing such a strong opponent, a small third-rate martial artist like him naturally didn't dare to show his face and act like a hero. However, you are just a little kid, so what if you are strong? The internal cultivation of martial artists relies on the inner chi. When your inner chi is exhausted, aren't you just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered? I have more than 1,000 men under me, you can kill as you like. Let's see how long you can kill. With this mentality, the bandit leader watched the fire from the other side and stood at the back. He allowed his underlings to be slaughtered like chickens by He Chuan. However, the situation went beyond his imagination. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of corpses lay on the ground. This kid was still as fierce as ever. The fierce bandits were all frightened by the slaughter. They didn't dare to step forward for a moment. However, at this moment, He Chuan also stopped. The leader of the bandits was delighted. He thought that his inner chi had been used up, so he quickly ordered, "Hurry up and move. Don't give him time to rest, this kid's inner chi has been used up." The bandits looked at each other, but no one dared to move. Seeing this, the leader of the bandits immediately said, "Anyone who can chop off his head will be rewarded with 50 taels of gold." The bandits immediately became spirited when they heard this. 50 taels of gold. This was enough for them to play with more than a dozen courtesans from brothels. Charge! For a moment, hundreds of people seemed to have been injected with stimulants as they swarmed over. They howled and wanted to chop off He Chuan's head. "I didn't expect my head to be so valuable." He Chuan smiled faintly. With a wave of the Buddhist monk's knife in his hand, a bloody scar suddenly appeared on the face of the nearest bandit. In less than half a second, his body slowly fell to the sides. This time, it was not only his internal organs that were scattered on the ground. There was also milky white brain matter. How is this possible? The bandit leader looked at this scene in great surprise. He could split a person in half without using inner chi? And he used such an ordinary Buddhist monk knife? What kind of joke was this? When did the human body become so fragile? He fell into deep doubt. Looking at He Chuan, who was like a god of death, an absolutely impossible reason suddenly flashed through his mind, but he could only use this explanation. External cultivator. Only external cultivators who focused on training their strength and skills could do this. But didn't this mean that the little brat in front of him was a dual cultivator? The bandit leader instinctively denied this possibility. But the truth happened before his eyes, and he had no choice but to believe it. But just as he was in a daze, He Chuan suddenly exploded. It was as if he was tired of playing. He killed dozens of people in a row, broke through the crowd, and rushed in front of him. The bandit leader was shocked. He was about to attack, but the moment this thought arose, the Buddhist monk knife in He Chuan's hand was already placed on his neck. What was going on? After fighting for so long, he still had the stamina to maintain such a fast speed? The bandit leader was dumbfounded. He carefully swallowed his saliva, afraid that the blade would cut his neck. His mind was no longer thinking about how to kill He Chuan, but how to survive under He Chuan's blade. Hero! Don't kill me! Anything you want? Money, woman? I'll give it to you. 26 Chapter 26 Chapter 26, Zhang Muji. The atrocity of the county magistrate. He Chuan's gaze was cold and he did not say a word. His heart was filled with killing intent as he injected some inner qi into his palm. It was as if he had noticed something. The bandit leader immediately changed his words. Wait. I can tell you a secret. It's about Grass Temple Village. He Chuan's hand froze. Speak. The bandit leader rolled his eyes and took the opportunity to speak. I can say it, but you have to promise that you'll let me go. You're not qualified to negotiate with me. He Chuan snorted coldly and exerted force in his hand, sending the sword forward a little. The bandit leader was startled, thinking that his head was going to be moved. In the end, the blade only scratched a little bit of his skin. The pain made him understand that once the 10-year-old kid's patience was exhausted, he would definitely die. At this moment, all the bandits gathered around and glared at He Chuan. If you take one step forward, your boss's head will fall to the ground. He Chuan's tender voice spread throughout the scene. His sharp gaze swept across everyone and everyone could not help but take a few steps back. This group of bandits was already scared of him. Who had ever seen a fart-sized child kill thousands of people? Today was an eye-opener. Idiot! The bandit leader shouted, all of you get lost. Get lost! Do you want me to die? The bandits immediately did not dare to act rashly. They looked at each other and slowly retreated. Speak. He Chuan's tone became more serious. He did not have much patience anymore. I'll speak. I'll speak. Faced with such a powerful He Chuan, the leader of the bandits had no choice but to answer. I wasn't the only one who massacred the Grass Temple village. I was also ordered by someone. He is the county magistrate who is in charge of this place, Zhang Muji. As he said this, he started to observe He Chuan's expression. Looking at the little brat's furrowed brows and confused expression, he understood that he did not know the cause and effect of this matter. It seemed that he was here to carry out justice for the heavens. He was only here to take revenge for the villagers of Grass Temple Village. In the eyes of the bandit leader, He Chuan must be a genius disciple of some martial arts aristocratic family, going out to train. He might even have even stronger martial artists protecting him. Because he had passed by this place and seen their atrocities, he had made a bold move. Otherwise, how could he explain that such a big child had such profound martial arts? And he had cultivated both internal and external cultivation. His martial arts skills were probably at the top among third-rate martial artists. He did not have the slightest chance of winning. Not to mention there was also a guardian who was hiding nearby and would attack when He Chuan encountered danger. Because of this, he did not want to escape and could only shift his hatred. When He Chuan heard the name Zhang Muji, he did not have much of an impression. However, he was not unfamiliar with the title of county magistrate. This was an official appointed by the imperial court. He was in charge of dozens or hundreds of villages and towns. In this remote place, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he was the local emperor who ruled the area. You're telling me that he sent you to slaughter the people in his area? Do you think I'm stupid? Can he bear such a huge responsibility? Can he hide it? However, When He Chuan verified it through the deduction system, it was confirmed from the side that the bandit leader was telling the truth. Could it be that the officials and bandits were really colluding? Seeing the bandit leader's cautious look and wanting to probe further, He Chuan was impatient. If you have something to say, then say it quickly. If you don't say it, then there's no need to say it. The bandit leader was shocked and quickly told him the whole story. At that time, there was an outbreak of plague in Grass Temple village. When the report was made, several people had already died. More than half of the villagers were infected and couldn't be controlled at all. Failing to control the plague is a big crime. Once the higher UPS find out about it, the dismissal and investigation will be the light punishment. This Zhang Muji's nickname is pockmarked Zhang. He bought his way to be an official. How could he become one? Therefore, this Zhang Muji wanted to forcefully suppress the news, lock up all the people who were infected, and send them to the temple to await death. However, there are still some family members in the village who are not infected. In the past 2 years, they would run to the county office from time to time to ask about the whereabouts and situation of their family members. Zhang Muji didn't send anyone to the temple to check at all. How would he know if these people were dead or alive? He could only put up with it perfunctorily. He was worried that these people's family members would find out the truth and report it to the imperial court, so he went all out and found me. Actually, this has nothing to do with me. It was Zhang Muji who asked me to come over and kill all the people in Grass Temple village. At the same time, he took over a few nearby villages and towns, sealed the news, and executed those who didn't listen. I had no choice. He could apply for a crusade order at any time and ask the imperial court to send troops to crusade against me. I was also thinking about the future of this group of brothers. Look. This is the tax law that was just issued. I specially asked him to reduce the taxes of these few villages by half so that the lives of these people would not be so difficult. As he spoke, the bandit leader took out a yellow paper with a seal on it. The content of the tax reduction was indeed written on it, and the signature was also Zhang Muji. He Chuan took a closer look and suddenly felt that something was wrong. You said that he was an official who bought his way to be the county magistrate. That's right. The county magistrate is just an official who sits in the court to hear cases. Where did he get the right to change the taxes? Little brother. Oh no, big brother, you don't know. The higher UPS saw that Zhang Muji's prevention and control of the epidemic was beneficial and promoted him by 1 level. He has already become the county head magistrate. What about the imperial court? How did they do things? Letting a dog-like official like him climb up the ranks. The bandit leader looked at the Buddhist monk knife on his neck and carefully swallowed his saliva. That. Cough, the imperial court did send people over, but they were all brought by Zhang Muji to play around. After playing for a few days, their bodies were weak, so they naturally couldn't come to Grass Temple village to check on the situation. He Chuan took a deep breath and clenched his fists unconsciously. This world was really ridiculous. It was one thing to buy and sell official positions, but there were actually officials and bandits colluding to take the opportunity to get promoted and get rich. It was really deserved to die. The bandit leader seemed to have felt something. No, spare me. Whoosh. He Chuan suddenly moved the sword in his hand horizontally. The blade, which was full of crack, was wrapped with inner chi, and it cut open the throat of the bandit leader with incomparable ease. Warm scarlet blood gushed out. He clutched his neck in panic and knelt on the ground. He looked at He Chuan with fear in his eyes, as if he was still asking why he had killed him. Spare you? Then did you spare the women you played with? 27 Chapter 27 Chapter 27, Use your blood to pay for it. The blood in the bandit leader's body was quickly drained. In the end, he was exhausted and no longer move. When the bandits at the side saw this scene, they were all stunned at first. Then, they looked at He Chuan, who was full of killing intent, and instantly lost the thought of taking revenge. Run! Only by running can one survive. However, most of the people in the field were injured, and it was difficult for them to move. After the previous battle, the square was filled with the corpses of the bandits. Their greasy internal organs and fresh blood covered the entire ground. It was as if they had fallen into a swamp, and they could not run far. He Chuan's knife slashed down. The few remaining bandits were suddenly reduced by more than 10. He stepped on mountains of corpses and seas of blood as if he was walking on flat ground. Every step he took landed on the half-dead bandits who had been cut in half. Every step would trigger a wail filled with pain. The remaining people could not help but despair when they saw this scene. No matter how tough the bandits were, they were just ordinary people who had some training. Compared to real martial artists, they were far worse. Facing He Chuan's pursuit, they had no hope of escaping. In just a few minutes, He Chuan caught up with them one by one and killed them all. Only after dealing with these people did He Chuan have time to turn back and check on the situation of the villagers who had been humiliated. Sigh. Miserable. He Chuan couldn't bear to look at them. When he got closer, he found that the wrists of the men who had been hung up had been cut open. Under the strangulation, blood dripped bit by bit. Now, their skin and lips were a little pale. They had already lost too much blood and were in a state of shock. The wound was behind the rope, and there was no way to bandage it and stop the bleeding. If the rope was untied, they would definitely die in this situation where there was no way to transfuse blood immediately. He Chuan kept deducing in his mind, trying to find a way to save them. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. The standard of medical treatment in this era was too low. Even though he had countless methods and theoretical solutions in his mind. However, in this place where there was no medical treatment, he, who was called the Divine Doctor, could only watch helplessly. He Chuan sighed softly and walked in front of them. He had something in his heart, but he did not know how to say it. However, one of them suddenly raised his head slowly and looked at him with an extremely weak gaze. It's the Divine Doctor. He Chuan nodded slightly. He hesitated for a moment before saying, I can't save you. Divine Doctor, you've done enough, don't blame yourself. His sentence was divided into several parts. Each time, he had to rest for a long time, as if doing such an ordinary thing required all of his strength. I only have one wish. Please. Halfway through his second sentence, he had no strength left. He could only suppress his sleepiness and look at his wife, who was being abused by the bandits in turn, not far away. He felt an endless longing in his heart, and tears burst out of his eyes. He did not want to die. He wanted to spend his life with his wife. He wanted to watch his children grow up. He wanted to fish and farm in a secluded place. He wanted to enjoy his old age and enjoy his family. However, things didn't go as planned. This disaster took away all the good things. In the end, he fell asleep slowly with mixed feelings. He Chuan knew that he couldn't save them anymore. The other people were in the same condition. Although they still had their breath and pulse, it was no different from death. Sigh. He Chuan shook his head. He had to think of a way to save the others. The few young women on the ground had already sunk into a state of autism. There was no response to the outside world's stimulation. He Chuan had no way at the moment. He could only take out clean clothes from the nearby houses and cover them. He would use the deduction system to think of a way later. Finally, only Xiaohua and her father were left. Xiaohua was already dead. She had been brutally treated by God knows how many bandits when she was alive. They raped and killed her. Her waist and buttocks were covered in blood. Milky white liquid kept flowing out from between her legs, dripping onto her ankle, which was bleeding from being strangled. Xiaohua did not react at all. Her father, who was lying on top of her, did not react either. Only then did He Chuan realize. Xiaohua's father's tendons had been broken by the bandits, and his limbs were unable to move. He was still in a state of humiliating Xiao Hua. He crawled on Xiao Hua's breasts, which had been cut open by the knife. He looked at Xiao Hua's dead face and burst into tears. "Uncle Hua!" He Chuan called out softly. Xiao Hua's father did not react. It was as if he had become a doll that could not move, just like those women. He Chuan could not bear it and was about to pick him up when he suddenly heard him say something. "Kill me." "What? Uncle Hua, what did you say?" He Chuan did not hear clearly and asked again. "Kill me." This time, He Chuan heard it clearly and his hands stopped moving. After a long silence, he finally said, "I have already avenged Xiao Hua. Uncle Hua, live well in the future. Let's just kill me." Uncle Hua suddenly roared. His body involuntarily trembled. He tried his best to turn his body and looked at He Chuan with bloodshot eyes. In his eyes, it was filled with a thirst for death. He Chuan did not speak. He stood up and slowly picked up the sword on the ground. He knew that Uncle Hua had made up his mind. Even if he could survive today, he would think of a way to commit suicide tomorrow. "Thank you." Uncle Hua watched as the short knife fell. He let out a bitter laugh and closed his eyes. He was free. He Chuan looked up at the sky and the anger in his heart kept rising. The leader of the bandits was dead, but this matter was not over yet. "Zhang Muji, just you wait. The debt of hundreds of lives in Grass Temple Village, you will use your blood to pay for it." The next day, He Chuan found that the women who had been humiliated had committed suicide one after another. Some had jumped into a well, some had hanged themselves, and some had taken poison. They had left very decisively, not giving him a chance to treat them. He Chuan buried the villagers in silence, as well as the abbot monk. He set fire to the Grass Temple village along with the corpses of thousands of bandits and then went up the mountain to inform the few people who were left. He left them some silver money, which they could use to change their place of living. The few people kowtowed and expressed their gratitude. He Chuan himself left the place. He bought a pure black cloak and walked towards the county. 28 Chapter 28 Chapter 28, Assassination. On the way, He Chuan walked as he tried to find out more information about Zhang Muji. If he didn't investigate, he wouldn't know, but once he did, he was shocked. This Zhang Muji was much more detestable than he had imagined. During his tenure as a county magistrate, there were countless cases of injustice, falsehood and wrongdoings, but as the parents and officials of the common people, he actually dared to do such a thing as abducting women. Whenever he saw a beautiful girl, he would use his status to forcefully marry her. It was said that after he became the county head magistrate, every 2 days, there would be another concubine in his backyard. And this was already his 18th concubine. Everyone was furious at this kind of behavior, but they didn't dare to speak out. This was because this Zhang Muji not only had an official status, but he was also a late-stage third-rate martial artist. Although martial artists were divided into 3 steps, with first-rate being the strongest, it was as rare as a phoenix feather. And third-rate being the weakest and were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. However, in this remote mountain county, third-rate martial artists were rare. They were already the highest strength in martial arts. Moreover, he was a late-stage martial artist. An outstanding third-rate martial artist. So much so that if anyone dared to say anything bad about Zhang Muji, he would be able to rely on his martial arts skills to kill those who talked about him on the spot. There was nothing they could do. Faced with such a strong deterrence, the girls that he had taken a fancy to could only accept their fate. To avoid implicating the family, they agreed with him with tears in their eyes. "Just right, I can use this opportunity to teach this bastard a lesson." He Chuan had obtained the best assassination plan through the deduction system. It was on the night of his wedding when he was most unprepared. Zhang Muji's evil deeds were uncountable. Killing him could be considered a merit. He Chuan's gaze turned cold. He hid in the darkness and hid on a certain rooftop. He silently watched the brightly lit county head magistrate estate not far away, looking for an opportunity to strike. At this moment, Zhang Muji was immersed in the lively atmosphere of the banquet, drinking and chatting with the guests. He was completely unaware of his arrival. He looked at the scene. Those who could come here to congratulate him were basically the same as Zhang Muji. They were either local profiteers or notorious officials of Lin County. All in all, none of them were good. They were all people who had obtained their current status by squeezing the fruits of other people's hard work, even their lives. They used their power to do whatever they wanted. Ordinary people would definitely avoid them. Therefore, almost 2 streets outside the county head magistrate estate were uninhabited. Or rather, those who lived there were all Zhang Muji's trusted aides. Now, they had all come to the mansion to congratulate him. Just right. Deliberately showing strength as a warning. He Chuan didn't wait for Zhang Muji to return to the bridal chamber before reappearing. Right at this time, he used his inner chi to wrap around 2 sharp daggers and fiercely swing them out. The sound of the air being torn apart was perfectly covered by the noisy conversations of the banquet. However, Zhang Muji was a real late-stage third-rate martial artist after all. The sense of danger hidden in his subconscious was still present. Even though he was a little drunk, he could still sense He Chuan's attack very keenly. He jerked his body and rolled to the ground. Clang! The dagger left a long trail and sank deep into the ground. Zhang Muji found it hard to believe when he saw it. Was this a second-rate internal cultivator assassin? He was scared. He stood up and looked around the courtyard. You have a strong inner chi, so you must be a strong martial artist. Why did you hide your head and tail? More daggers responded to him. The guests couldn't sit still. Most of them weren't martial artists, so their strength was very limited. In this kind of battle, they would only become cannon fodder. The slightest carelessness would result in instant death. So much so that a few seconds after the battle started, over 100 people hurriedly fled, and the entire courtyard became a mess. Such a chaotic scene made Zhang Muji frown even more when he saw it. Wouldn't this make it easier for the assassin to move? At this moment when he was distracted. As expected, a blade ray wrapped with a powerful aura appeared from behind at this time. Zhang Muji had never expected that. His opponent's timing was so experienced. It was as if he knew when his attention would be distracted. It was also because of his carelessness that the tip of the blade swept across him. Zhang Muji could only turn his body to the side at this critical moment to avoid being cut in half. The price was to lose his entire arm. The intense pain assaulted him, making his mind extremely clear. Zhang Muji did not cry out in pain. Facing such an opponent who was stronger than him, he definitely could not panic. The more dangerous it was, the more he had to maintain his composure. Turning his gaze, a few people had already escaped from the courtyard and ran into the distance. That was the direction of the city guards, garrisoned with well-equipped troops. No matter how strong a martial artist was, they would eventually run out of strength. They definitely wouldn't be able to contend against an army. Perhaps, as long as they dragged it out for a period of time, they would be able to wait for their savior. But right at this moment, several white lights flashed in the dark night, accurately hitting those who had escaped. They felt as if they had been struck by lightning, their bodies stiffening as they fell to the ground. A young and tender voice filled with killing intent sounded. Those who leave the courtyard will be killed without mercy. Everyone could not help but tremble, and they immediately did not dare to run around. No one doubted the authenticity of this sentence. A martial artist possessed strength that far surpassed that of an ordinary person, and it was easy for them to do this. No one would use their own lives to test the strength of an assassin. Zhang Muji tore off a piece of clothing to wrap around his broken arm, and gritted his teeth as he asked, "Who exactly are you, sir? What enmity does this official have with you? Even if I die, let me understand why." Official. A light laugh came from the darkness. Do you still remember that you're an official? As the sound of his voice faded, a thin figure dressed in a black robe appeared in everyone's line of sight. He held a Buddhist monk knife that was full of holes. It was stained with blood and emitted an unpleasant smell. Everyone could not help but imagine how many lives this person who looked like a dwarf had taken. It was also at this moment He Chuan took off the cloak on his head, revealing his tender face. He looked at Zhang Muji and asked calmly, "Do you know who I am?" 29 Chapter 29 Chapter 29, Zhang Muji, Die. It was actually a child. Although the people present could not be called high-ranking officials or rich merchants, they were still famous in the surrounding counties and towns. They were used to being arrogant and bullying others like they were bullying a child. In the end, they were bullied by a child today? Zhang Muji was also dumbfounded. Who the hell are you? How should I know? Then, his vision blurred. He didn't know how this child did it. The next second, He Chuan had already kicked him to the ground. He held his sword horizontally and pressed it against his chest. If you don't know, then remember. The person who killed you is an orphan from the Grass Temple village, He Chuan. Zhang Muji's eyes widened. Grass Temple village? Orphan? He immediately thought of the bandit leader. Damn it! He was definitely the one who sold himself. 30% of the taxes were not enough to feed these bastards. If he had known earlier, he would have done it himself. But now it was useless no matter how regretful he was. He Chuan did not give Zhang Muji any chance to beg for mercy. Swoosh! A muffled sound was heard. Inner chi gushed out from the blade that was full of holes, directly cutting through his chest cavity. Fresh blood mixed with minced meat shot out, revealing the ghastly white bones inside. He Chuan aimed the Buddhist monk's knife at Zhang Muji's head and ruthlessly stabbed through it. After that, he even reached out his hand to hold Zhang Muji's heart. Under the terrified gazes of the surrounding guests, he dug it out bit by bit. With a cold snort, he crushed it. Everyone was so scared that they took a step back. They had already been numbed by this child who looked young but had exceptionally cruel methods. Damn it! Would he be so excited to kill that he would kill me as well? This was a question that arose in the hearts of most people. There were still a small number of people who were smarter. They heard what He Chuan had said. Once the two keywords of Grass Temple Village and Orphan were selected, his intention was clear at a glance. There was always a reason for killing people. Normal people would not kill innocents indiscriminately. It was obvious that this child was here for Zhang Muji. What did Zhang Muji do? There were still a few people present who knew. After thinking for a while, they could guess what had happened. It was nothing more than Zhang Muji sending the bandits to massacre the Grass Temple village. However, a child was saved by some unworldly expert. Perhaps he was even a first-rate martial artist. Then, he taught him peerless martial arts and became a third-rate expert in a short period of time. He came here to take revenge on Zhang Muji. In this way, they weren't afraid anymore. After all, every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. Such a big child couldn't possibly be the kind of devil that would kill anyone he saw, right? But the result was still beyond their imagination. After He Chuan called out the family members of the woman that Zhang Muji married today, he said that he had something to ask them. He told her family to pick up their daughter and wait for him in the main hall. What the rest of them had to face was his incomparably tyrannical inner chi. With a single move, the internal organs of everyone present were shattered and their lives were cut off. He Chuan pulled a tablecloth from the side and wiped his hands that were covered in blood. His gaze was calm as he looked at the corpses that lay on the ground. In any case, there wouldn't be any good people who could mingle with Zhang Muji. There was no need to worry about killing the wrong people. Killing all these people could be considered as eliminating the evil for the people. However, after avenging the people of Grass Temple Village, he still had more things to do. So many corrupt officials had died in his hands. If he left them be, when the news spread out, he would at most end up with a reputation of serving justice. However, in exchange, he would definitely be targeted by the imperial court. This wasn't conducive to his future development. He might as well control the hearts of the people in this region before that happened. He would seal off the news in exchange for an opportunity to develop. He would wait until he had perfected his tyrannical true cultivation method and raised his strength further. In any case, Zhang Muji was already dead. He could go and retrieve the county magistrate seal at any time. Once he obtained this thing that symbolized his status, no one would doubt him even if he said that he was the new county magistrate. The only thing he had to deal with was the officials and profiteers who did not attend the wedding banquet. This was a troublesome matter. If he wanted to find these people, he would have to rely on the ordinary people to report him. Therefore, He Chuan went to the main hall to see if the family had come. This was also a small trick of his. As long as he had not done anything bad, they would naturally not be afraid of him. But if he felt guilty, he would definitely run away. When he turned the corner and saw the family of three crying together, he couldn't help but frown. He Chuan suddenly realized. The woman that Zhang Muji married was actually about his age. She looked like she was at most 11 or 12 years old. What a beast! He could even move on such a young girl. When he thought of Zhang Muji's wretched old face, which was at least 40 years old, he felt disgusted. When the middle-aged couple saw He Chuan coming over, they immediately pulled their daughter forward to welcome him and knelt down to thank him. "Thank you, little hero, for saving my daughter from suffering. We, husband and wife, are eternally grateful." He Chuan casually asked a few questions about their family's life. It didn't take long for him to realize that they were also ordinary people. They opened a small restaurant in the county to make a living. Their cooking skills were pretty good, and everyone knew about it. Zhang Muji would go to his place to eat from time to time. By chance, he ran into his daughter. Seeing that she was beautiful and pure, he forced himself to marry her. His daughter was very sensible. She was afraid that her parents wouldn't agree and caused Zhang Muji to vent his anger on them, so she willingly got married. Although the husband and wife were sad, they couldn't do anything about it. Zhang Muji was an undisputed existence in Qingyuan County. There was no room for them to resist. Fortunately, He Chuan appeared at this time and killed that evil thief. He Chuan was very cautious. After using the deductive system to repeatedly verify that what they said was true, only then did he believe what they said. In that case, he could use this family to find out how many black sheep still had not been cleaned up. 30 Chapter 30 Chapter 30, Become a County Head Magistrate is quite fun, I want to play for a few years. At this moment, a man in armor who looked like a military commander suddenly appeared at the door. He stood outside the door and very keenly smelled the bloody smell in the mansion. At the same time, he saw He Chuan and the others who were talking. He frowned and his hand was already on the hilt of his sword. "What's going on inside? Who are you?" The family members immediately panicked and didn't know what to say. However, the girl's father whispered something in He Chuan's ear. He explained that the person who came was the city guard commander of the county. He was a decent person and was completely different from Zhang Muji. He Chuan understood and turned his head to look at the commander. He smiled with interest. "Why don't you go in and take a look yourself? How dare you?" He pulled out his long sword with a stern look and shouted, "Where is Lord Zhang? Who are you? You're quite cautious." He Chuan put his hands behind his back and said, "I've already killed Zhang Muji, and so have those who came to attend the wedding banquet. What do you want?" "What?" That person seemed a little surprised, but there was no anger or hatred in his eyes. He looked at He Chuan's extremely young and tender face. It would be a lie if he said that he didn't have any doubts. Such a 10-year-old child killed a late-stage third-rate martial artist like Zhang Muji? To be honest, not to mention that he didn't believe it, perhaps no martial artist in the entire world who had even the slightest foundation would believe it. At the age of 10, it was already good enough to be able to draw qi into one's body. However, the smell of blood that was constantly leaking out from the courtyard could not be faked. There were definitely many people who died in the backyard. It was probably just as the child said, there were no more living people. However, how could he do it by himself? An idea flashed through the commander's mind, and he thought of a certain possibility. There were many unworldly experts who frequently traveled the world, and they would punish evil and spread good wherever they saw injustice. Zhang Muji was notorious, and it was hard to survive if he met him. If nothing unexpected happened, this child was the disciple of that expert. Perhaps, he was watching from not far away. To be able to kill so many people without leaving a trace, it was very likely that he was a first-rate warrior. Such an existence was definitely not something he could deal with. Hence, he put his weapon back. You guys should hurry up and leave. Don't stay in the city for too long. Someone will probably notice something strange tomorrow. This news will spread very quickly. He Chuan's smile did not change. Leave? Did I say I was leaving? Then what are you going to do? Being a county head magistrate is quite fun. I want to play for a few years. A few years? The commander was stunned. His first reaction was that this child's brain had gone crazy. How could becoming a country head magistrate be a child's play? But on second thought, why would a child be interested in such a thing? It must be the intention of that expert. He just did not know what exactly they were going to do. Just as he was thinking, He Chuan's figure suddenly moved. His speed was astonishingly fast. In the dark night, only a shadow flashed by. When he reappeared, the commander felt a chill on his back, and his entire body was already bound by an unfamiliar inner qi. How is this possible? He turned pale with fright. Could inner qi be controlled so precisely? You must be joking, right? Just then, He Chuan's voice sounded from above. Don't be so surprised. You are the commander of the garrison troops, right? I want to be the county head magistrate, so what should you do at this time? A strong sense of oppression came over. This commander felt that he was as insignificant as an ant in front of this child. He gritted his teeth and hesitated for a long time before slowly saying, seal off the news and cooperate with your actions. Very good, a smart choice. Even if I help you block the news, it's useless. The imperial court will send people to check the political achievements every once in a while. How are you going to get away with it? This is not something you should consider. I have my own ways. He Chuan clapped his hands and jumped down from the high wall, pressing on his shoulder. The imperial court will not care about the life and death of a small county head magistrate. In this kind of world, it's not a big deal to have dozens or even hundreds of small characters die. Do you want to be such a small character? He kept silent. The meaning of his words was a little deep, and it was difficult to answer. I see ideals and ambitions in your eyes, what a pity. He Chuan looked at him, the only thing was the lack of guts. What exactly do you want to do? In the end, he still asked this question. To return a peaceful and prosperous era to the people. The commander turned pale with fright. You want to rebel? Maybe, at least not now. He Chuan yawned. I don't want to hear anyone talk about this tomorrow, can you do it? The commander looked down at the light blue inner qi wrapped around his body and smiled bitterly. Do I have a choice? Of course. He Chuan smiled and said, I won't kill you because you and Zhang Muji are not on the same side. If you don't agree, I can just leave. The commander was silent for a moment, then what can I get? He Chuan knew that his target had taken the bait. He smiled and said, a chance to realize his dream. Countless people in this world have died. The seeds of hatred have long been planted in people's hearts. With the change of times, the dynasty will change sooner or later. Now they just lack a person to lead them. You don't want to devote your life to such a rotten dynasty, right? Follow me. Even if you can't change the world now, at least you can change Qingyuan County. The commander looked deeply at He Chuan. All right. I promise you, but you have to ensure the safety of my family. Once the incident is exposed, this crime will exterminate my family. I can't bear it. Of course. He Chuan snapped his fingers and retracted all the inner chi that he had released. The commander felt his body lighten, and his trust in He Chuan increased a little. That expert who did not show up was really powerful. Just based on his meticulous control, most of the martial artists on the first level probably could not do it. With such a person as a backer, it seemed it wasn't impossible to overthrow this decadent dynasty. The commander shook his head violently. He was frightened by this terrifying thought of his. How could he think of rebelling? 31 Chapter 31 Chapter 31, Anno Data Annotation ID equals 64C0B6E6660569003BD2BF85DCF0E Lord Qingtian/Anno. Consolidate political power. The next day, the commander did what he had promised. He secretly disposed of the dozens of corpses in the county head magistrate estate without anyone noticing. He Chuan thus smoothly took the position of county head magistrate. Of course, in such an abrupt situation, he still needed to use some excuses to convince the people. Thus, the commander came forward and announced to the entire city. County head magistrate Zhang Muji was ordered by the imperial court to assist his colleagues in petitioning the capital. His position was temporarily taken over by He Chuan. Actually, this was quite ridiculous. Logically speaking, if the county head magistrate was not around, the substitute magistrate would only handle the daily matters. How could there be such a saying about appointing a person to help? However, Zhang Muji's daily work was quite ridiculous. The people were not surprised and quietly accepted it. The trial site of the government office was covered in dust. It seemed that Zhang Muji had not come here to hear a case for a long time. When they heard that he was the deputy magistrate, there were more than 10 people standing outside the door in the early morning, wanting to see the splendor of the new magistrate. When they saw that He Chuan was a 10-year-old child, they were all stunned for a moment, then shook their heads and left. This was a very normal reaction. Who would believe that a child of such an age would be able to close the case? He Chuan did not care. He began to learn more information from the commander. It was still all right if he did not hear this, but when he heard it, he was shocked. It turned out that this dynasty was far more rotten than he had imagined. It had already rotted to the core. Almost all the officials were imposing exorbitant taxes and levies. So much so that they formed a system of exploitation in the dark, constantly squeezing the common people. The people were living in dire straits. If He Chuan wanted to truly take control of Qingyuan County, he would have to clear out a large number of people. Therefore, in the next few months, He Chuan directly used the power in his hands to start cleaning up the corrupt officials and local bullies in the city. Especially those who colluded with the gangsters for political benefits were severely punished. The lighter sentence was to be sent to prison, at worst, they will be executed. During this period, there were naturally many people who resisted. However, under He Chuan's powerful martial arts, they were quickly suppressed. There was not even the slightest ripple. For a time, the county was completely clean. The number of crimes was greatly reduced. The people no longer had to worry about whether their lives would be threatened when they went out. They had not expected that the substitute magistrate would be so fierce. Not long after he took office, these tumors that had been entrenched for many years were removed. Not only that, but He Chuan also took out the money that Zhang Muji had exploited from the people for many years. He built a public academy and taught the children to read, write, and martial arts foundations. At the same time, he introduced the imperial examination system, selected talents thorough examinations, and gathered his subordinates to work for him. They even personally led the farmers out to cultivate the fields and teach them more scientific farming knowledge. In less than a year, Qingyuan County was already showing signs of prosperity. He Chuan was also known as Lord Qingtian by the people. This title meant that he was honest, impartial, and devoted to the people. In this era of dynasty rule, it was extremely rare. Social status has risen, the Lord Qingtian achievement has been unlocked. Evaluation points have increased greatly. When He Chuan heard the notification from the reincarnation seal, he knew that he could proceed to the next step. Now, he could be considered to have successfully consolidated his political power and gained a firm foothold in Qingyuan County. After gaining the hearts of the people, it didn't matter even if the news of Zhang Muji's death was leaked at this time. After all, who would report him at this time? Therefore, He Chuan began to expand outward at this time. Zhang Muji used to rule over hundreds of counties, townships, villages, and towns. Now he only controlled one, so of course, he had to take all of these territories. But it was a bit troublesome to do this. It was very inconvenient to move in this era. There was no specially paved road between Qingyuan County and its subordinate towns. As a result, if one wanted to go to other places, one would have to walk on the mountain road for several days. After cleaning up one place, I have to ensure that the news doesn't leak out. Otherwise, the corrupt officials in other areas will be on guard and they won't be able to catch them. Therefore, He Chuan had to go out personally and lead the city guards to go on an expedition everywhere. It took him nearly 3 years to clean up all the trash in this area. On his 14th birthday, the people were very grateful and brought all kinds of gifts to congratulate him. Most of them were very ordinary things. For example, eggs, fresh vegetables and so on. After all, the production of this era was limited. The ordinary people, especially those who lived in the ravines, could not earn much in a year. They were usually reluctant to eat these things. He Chuan did not mind. It was all the good intentions and blessings of the people. He accepted them all. Other than that, there were also many other kinds of gifts. The most unique one was the He Chuan clay figurine that the children had glued together. Everyone had especially moved it to the town god's temple and worshipped it. They wished that all the people in the world could meet a good official like Lord He. After that was a banquet. It was jointly organized by several restaurants in the city and invited all the people who could come. The wine tables were placed all over the streets and alleys. He Chuan showed his face in front of the people and after saying a few words, he returned to his residence and began to practice martial arts. In these few years, he had collected all the martial arts that he could get his hands on in the jurisdiction. The quality of these martial arts was much higher than the books in the dilapidated temple's scripture depository. Therefore, he made a second deduction and successfully wrote the absolute art tyrannical true cultivation method, middle. Now, he had cultivated to the level of perfection and successfully entered the ranks of a second-rate cultivator. He just didn't know what his actual strength was like. In the late, middle, and lower stages, what level was it? Suddenly, someone knocked on the courtyard door. He Chuan was a bit surprised. It couldn't be that they were here to give gifts in private, right? When he went out to take a look, it was indeed true. A young girl was standing in front of him with a shy look in her eyes. She was holding something that was covered by a black cloth in her hand. Big brother Chuan, Chiao is here again. He Chuan smiled gently. How many times have I told you? I'm 2 years younger than you. If you want to call me, you have to call me little brother. The young girl stuck out her tongue and made a face. She smiled and lifted the black cloth. At the same time, she reached out her hand. Here, see if it fits. Annotation style equals display, none. OL class equals Tynum sanitation container Lee data annotation ID equals 64C0B6EC66056903BD2 BFT85DCF0E. It refers to a just and incorruptible official /Lee/OL/annotations. 32 Chapter 32 Chapter 32, Imperial Family's Trading Group's Young Master. He Chuan received it and welcomed her into the courtyard. This young girl's name was Ke Xiao. She was the little girl that Zhang Muji had taken a fancy to and wanted to marry as a concubine. Now, things had changed. In the blink of an eye, she was already 16 years old. She had grown up to be slender and elegant. Her appearance was delicate and pretty, and she had the temperament of a young lady from a prestigious family. Usually, she would go to the government office to deliver some homemade snacks and drinks to He Chuan. After a while, they became familiar with each other. This time, she gave him a robe that was completely handmade. The texture was exquisite and the material used was soft. It was much better than the one he was wearing. "Thank you." He Chuan smiled and said, "It must be very hard to make such a robe, right?" "It's not hard." Ke Xiao quickly shook her head. "Try it, I sewed it according to the size I imagined, I don't know if it will fit. Then I'll go to my room to change." "No need, there are no outsiders here, just change here." Ke Xiao's pretty face was slightly red and her eyes were uneasy. "If it doesn't fit, I'll know what to change." "All right." He Chuan turned around and took off his clothes, revealing his muscular back. This was the result of tempering his body with inner qi all year round. Ke Xiao's eyes were wide open. She covered her mouth with a surprised expression. Her gaze moved back and forth on He Chuan's body, and she couldn't help but think of some strange things. After He Chuan put on his clothes, his entire temperament was further refined. Indeed, a person depended on clothes and a horse depended on saddles. Although the current He Chuan's facial features were still a little tender due to his age. But he looked strangely mature and steady. Between his brows and eyes, there was always an indescribable attraction, as if people could put their trust in him. Ke Xiao could not help but sink into it. For a moment, she was in a daze. He Chuan shook his head and went up to knock on her forehead. "What are you thinking about?" "Ah!" Ke Xiao felt as if she had just woken up from a dream. Immediately after, several images flashed through her mind, and she suddenly ran away while covering her flushed face. He Chuan was a little speechless. After he tidied up his clothes, he realized that they fit him perfectly. There was no need to change them, so he did not call Ke Xiao back. Continue to cultivate. Days passed. He Chuan's cultivation was also increasing day by day. In the blink of an eye, he had completely comprehended the tyrannical true cultivation method, middle, and there was no more room for improvement. It was also at this time that he had the idea of leaving Qingyuan County. Of course, he was not giving up on this place. Instead, he was going out alone for a period of time to pursue a higher level of martial arts. However, something unexpected happened. The imperial court suddenly sent a message. The gist of the message was that a young master from the imperial family's trading group wanted to come over and have fun. He wanted Zhang Muji to take good care of him. With Zhang Muji dead, this burden naturally fell on He Chuan. The city guarding commander knew that He Chuan was someone who wasn't afraid of power. However, he still advised him to endure for a period of time to calm down. It was best to take care of him. After all, this kind of person could inform the higher UPS. When he returned, he would be able to report everything that happened on this trip back to the emperor. If they attracted the attention of that group of people, they would not be at ease. He Chuan did not say anything. He just told the commander to do his own thing and act as usual. Over the years, he had received many officials from the capital. He had used the deduction system to fool them all. Although the situation this time was a little different, it should not be too difficult to deal with a young master from an aristocratic family. It was just as he had imagined. The young master who had come over was a typical prodigal. He acted arrogantly and disregarded the law. Not long after he had entered Qingyuan County, he had caused complaints from the commoners. However, everyone knew very well that this was someone who had come from the capital. If there was a conflict, it would only make things difficult for Lord He. So they tolerated it. But in the end, the young master took this tolerance as his confidence to act recklessly. When he happened to see Kei Xiao, who was as beautiful as a flower, he actually became lascivious and took a civilian woman on the street by force. This time, everyone couldn't sit still. In Qingyuan County, who didn't know that Kei Xiao's sweetheart was Lord He? How dare you touch Lord He's fiancé? Aren't you courting death? Immediately, a few martial artists stopped him. Together with his guards, they took care of him and sent him to the government office. This young master was dumbfounded. In such a big county, how could there still be an existence that could take care of his guards? One had to know that his guards were all third-rate experts. Moreover, they practiced the martial arts of their families. They were definitely of high-grade standards. Among them, there was even a second-rate middle-grade martial artist. In the end, they were still taken down? He couldn't understand. In fact, after He Chuan had painstakingly managed Qingyuan County for so many years, its reputation had long spread far and wide. Many martial artists knew that there was a clean place here that wasn't affected by the corrupt officialdom. Many martial arts experts treated this place as a good place to practice martial arts and retire. As a result, Qingyuan County was filled with hidden talents. Perhaps some unremarkable old man who was pushing a cart was a second-rate martial artist. However, the young master didn't panic at all. What was his identity? It was as if he was joking. To put it bluntly, even if it was the boss of Qingyuan County, Zhang Muji wasn't even fit to carry his shoes. Did he dare to lay a hand on him? He must be tired of living. Damn it! Let go of me! You bunch of unruly people! When I return, the first thing I'll do is to send someone to deal with all of you. On the law court, under the sign that said silence, the young master shouted loudly. 2 rows of bailiffs stood beside him. They looked at the young master with only pity, not fear. He he! Teach us a lesson? Don't you even know where we are? At this moment, He Chuan's figure appeared from the side passageway. Without saying a word, he walked to the table in the hall and sat down. When the young master saw that the county head magistrate had arrived, he snorted coldly. Zhang Muji, right? Quickly let go of me. How did you do things? Letting those unruly people tie me up. You don't want that anno data annotation ID equals 443D777865488577D58102C78 sub 0 AF black hat / anno anymore. He Chuan didn't even look at him. He picked up the punishment wood slab next to him and threw it down. 50 slaps, hit. Annotation style equals display, none. OL class equals Tynum sanitation container Lee data annotation ID equals 443D778654885777D58102C78 sub 0 AF the black gauze cap which worn by feudal officials / Lee / OL / annotations. 33 Chapter 33 Chapter 33 Human Trafficking. It had infiltrated the chain of benefits of an entire dynasty. The bailiffs immediately stepped forward with their hitting sticks. The guard beside the young master shouted. Stop! Zhang Muji, do you know who my young master is? You dare to torture him? He Chuan ignored him. If you had committed a crime in Qingyuan County, you would be punished. If you dared to snatch a civilian's daughter on the street, even giving him 50 slaps would be a light punishment. 4 or 5 bailiffs directly held up the young master and pressed him to the ground to serve him with big boards. They did not hold back at all. Impudent! Let go of my young master! Those few guards were anxious. One had to know that if their master was injured, it meant that they did not protect him well. When they returned, they would definitely be punished. They might even be kicked out of the family with broken legs. This was something that they could not afford. Thus, they struggled with all their might, the veins all over their bodies bulging. Not long after, that second-rate martial artist actually used brute force to break the rope and regain his freedom. Just as he was about to attack and send the bailiffs who were using the punishment flying, his vision suddenly blurred. He only felt a strong force crashing into his chest. Amidst the muffled sound of bones breaking, his body could not help but fly backward. When he hit the wall of the government office, he bounced back and landed on the ground. When he looked into the hall, the county head magistrate actually stood at his original position, still maintaining the posture of a palm strike. You are actually a second-rate. Puff. The strongest guard suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Before he could finish his sentence, he fell to the ground and fainted. The two third-rate guards were stunned. How was this Zhang Muji so powerful? Wasn't he rumored to be a third-rate warrior? How did he kill their boss in an instant? He Chuan looked back indifferently, continue with the punishment. The small conflict did not change the outcome of the young master being beaten up. When the 50 boards fell, his entire waist and buttocks were covered in blood. He looked very miserable. But this young master was not convinced. His mouth was still full of profanities. He kept saying that he would make sure that everyone here died without a burial ground. He Chuan smiled slightly and had the bailiffs hit him 50 slaps again. This time, the young master could not even speak clearly. Tell me the purpose of this trip to Qingyuan County. Also, how many times have you done such a thing as seizing a civilian girl? The young master continued to wail but did not reply. You're pretending not to hear me, right? All right, fellas, hit him 30 more times. The young master trembled. Don't hit me anymore. If you hit me again, I'm going to die. If you're afraid of death, then say it. He Chuan heavily strikes the wooden block on the table and exerts more pressure. My family does business with the royal family. This time, I came out to purchase some exquisite goods that are not available in the north. I'm preparing to pay tribute to the nobles in the palace during the new year. What else? He Chuan did not care about the purpose of his visit to Qingyuan County. He cared more about how to convict him. The young master avoided his gaze. I've only done this kind of thing today, once, really just this once. That little beauty is really too beautiful. I couldn't help it. The surrounding people discussed amongst themselves. This little brat is so arrogant and despotic. He must have done many things to bully the good. First time? Tui. Who would believe it? That's right. He did nothing good when he entered the city. Old Wang's horse was only traveling with him. Yet this brat said that it blocked his way and had the guards kill the horse without even paying for it. He, in all the years that my lord has been in this position, he has never made a wrong or unjust claim. To dare to lie in front of my lord, he must be tired of living. This kind of person should be beaten up. If he is honest, he will naturally say it. He Chuan didn't believe it either, but he still operated the deduction system to verify it and quickly analyzed it before coming to a conclusion. He was lying. Looks like you're very dishonest. Then I'll beat you another 30. Oh no, I'll beat you up another 50 times. The corners of He Chuan's mouth curled up slightly. In the eyes of this young master, this smile was no different from a devil. He subconsciously wanted to dodge, but the moment he moved, the wound on his body was torn open, and he immediately cried out in pain. But looking at the bailiffs who walked in again, he still endured the pain and shouted. Stop! The bailiffs glanced at He Chuan. He Chuan gently raised a hand, indicating that he could stop. Then he said faintly, my patience is limited. If you only know how to talk nonsense, you don't have to speak any more later. Yes, yes. I understand. The young master lowered his eyes. This sentence was very threatening. He was already a little afraid. He Chuan calmly asked, how many times have you done this? I can't count it. The young master was a little hesitant, but looking at He Chuan's eyes that seemed to be able to see through his heart, he still said this sentence. There was an uproar outside the hall, and the people cried out in surprise. How many girls had been raped by this beast? He Chuan also frowned. But he used the deduction system to make the calculations. So his thoughts were somewhat different from the people's. He couldn't remember clearly. This meant that the young master had done similar things no less than dozens of times. Even more than 100 times. What did this mean? This meant that someone was backing him up. He was just a descendant of a merchant. How could he remain unharmed despite committing so many crimes? In this era, the status of a merchant was not high. Therefore, He Chuan followed this line of thought and interrogated him. At first, this young master was still vague and did not reveal much. Later, He Chuan directly broke his legs. He said that if he did not tell the truth, he would use the cruelest torture. Of course, this was to scare him. But the young master obviously could not help it. Previously, He Chuan had already left a very deep impression on him, so much so that after this, he promised to tell him what he knew. However, he asked He Chuan to temporarily close the government office and forbid the people from listening, otherwise, he would not say even if he died. He Chuan ordered the government office servants to do as he said. Only then did the young master slowly speak. It turned out that the family that this young master belonged to did not only do business in the country. In private, they also do human trafficking. As long as they met beautiful girls, they would capture them and bring them to the capital. The young masters would enjoy them first. After that, they would use their connections to send them to various parts of the dynasty and let the high officials and nobles play with them. When they were tired of playing with them, they would sell the girls to brothels and exchange them for money. After that, the money would once again be sent to the high officials in the capital. With that, half of the dynasty's officials would gain benefits, so naturally, no one would care. Even if it caused public resentment, the local government officials would only put on a show and capture this young master and let him go in private. These women would only be manipulated by others until they were old and yellow, ending their miserable lives. After he said this, everyone was furious. 34 Chapter 34 Chapter 34, Assassination. Wanted by the Empire. The bailiffs gritted their teeth, wishing they could skin this beast alive. They could even imagine how helpless and desperate the girls who were captured were when they were humiliated. He Chuan was also filled with anger. He never thought that he would be able to dig out such an inside story from this young master. He also never thought that the dynasty had already rotted to such a degree. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were all a jerk. Lord Zhang. I have already finished speaking. Actually, when you took office, our family already sent someone to send a message over. Who knew that you would do something so incorruptible and reject my father? Sai, why are you trying to confront the higher UPS? Listen to my advice. This is called go with the flow, you can't change it by yourself. I came here this time because my father asked me to bring 2 boxes of gold, silver, and jewelry to show my respect to you. Don't worry. This Qingyuan County will definitely still be under your control in the future. As long as you don't stop my family. Hehe, when the time comes those higher UPS were full, won't you also have a share of the credit? The young master smiled sheepishly as he fawned over him. Looking at He Chuan deep in thought, he felt that this matter was already more than half done. As long as this Zhang Muji was a smart person, he definitely wouldn't refuse such a request. Hehe. After you agree, see how I'll use my connections to deal with you when I get back. He felt the constant pain in his waist, hips, and legs. A trace of resentment flashed through his eyes. But at this moment, creak. The door of the government office was suddenly opened. A large group of people gathered outside. They were excited. They were shouting that they wanted to kill him. What was going on? The young master was stunned. Lord Zhang, you. Who told you that my name is Zhang Muji? He Chuan put on a fake smile. now that everyone has heard what you said, as long as I don't do anything, you will be trampled by everyone and beaten to death." The young master's expression changed. "You're not Zhang Muji? Then who are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am." He Chuan slowly approached with his hands behind his back. "What's important is that you have to tell me the names of those who participate in the human trafficking chain." "Bah!" The young master suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. "In your dreams? Why do you act like I'm the villain?" He Chuan fluttered away and smiled lightly. "It won't be that simple. Bring the torture instruments and the medicine box." The bailiffs moved quickly. Soon, dozens of torture instruments of different shapes were brought into the hall and arranged in several rows in front of the young master. "I forgot to tell you." He Chuan gently rubbed his wrist, picked up the medicine box, and squatted down beside the young master. "Apart from martial arts, I also have good attainments in medical arts." "Well, I'm not very good, but I can guarantee that you won't die after enjoying all the torture instruments." The young master's expression was dull. "Let's see, where should we start?" "No. No!" The young master cried out. "You're not a human, you're a devil." "A devil?" He Chuan stopped talking. He opened the medicine box and dug out the bottles and jars inside. He casually sprinkled a bottle of pale yellow medicine powder on the young master's wound. Soon, the young master only felt a numbing sensation on his wound. It didn't seem to hurt as much. This wasn't a good thing. This meant that He Chuan really had that kind of ability. He really had to endure the torture of dozens of torture instruments. He was born into a wealthy family, and he hadn't even bumped into on a daily basis. How could he withstand such an injury? A fishy smell spread out. Unknowingly, he had already been scared to the point of incontinence. "I'll speak!" The young master cried out. He Chuan's hand paused, and he looked at him with a smile. A wise choice. Very quickly, following the young master's narration, a list of names was obtained by He Chuan. "Even Lin County has been infiltrated." He Chuan was very surprised. One had to know that the imperial capital was thousands of li away from here. To travel by modern means of transportation would take at least a few months to arrive. For a county to be able to bribe, one could imagine that this industrial chain had been formed for many years. It was definitely not something that could be accomplished overnight. The further down the list, the more prominent the people that appeared. They were all existences that acted as protective umbrellas. Among them, the one with the highest position was actually the Anno Data Annotation ID equals C9AF33AD42027FBC4023F463C2ECF7D3 Senior Grand Secretary / Anno. This was an existence that was below one person and above 10,000 people. He did not expect that he would be covering up for such an illegal industry. It was truly unexpected. Looking at the half-dead young master, He Chuan decided to give him a quick death. He would use his inner chi to break his heart and end his sinful life. "You're really lucky." He Chuan snorted coldly. He did not have the slightest bit of pity and directly end the life of the other two guards. Since he had already offended this family, killing a few more would not make a difference. But the news would definitely be unable to be sealed. Many people knew that this young master had come to Qingyuan County. It was estimated that it would not be long before his backers would be alerted. Rather than waiting for death, it was better to take the initiative to attack. Thus, He Chuan colluded with the people who came to watch. If someone came to ask if the young master had come to Qingyuan County in the future, they would all say no. After that, he threw the bodies of the young master and the guards in the area where the bandits were running rampant, creating the illusion that they were being killed. This way, not only would they be able to completely conceal the truth, they could at least temporarily hold back the investigation process of the other party and confuse the public. After dealing with the follow-up matters, He Chuan carried out the assassination according to the people on the list. At the start, they were just small officials like the county magistrate. The dynasty did not pay too much attention to them and randomly sent a few secret police forces to investigate. However, as the rank of the officials who were assassinated became higher and higher, the news of a chivalrous hero doing good for the people started to spread. Some people could not sit still anymore. After being reported to the higher authorities, the imperial court finally put up a generous reward and began to send out martial artists to carry out a large-scale arrest. Annotation style equals display, none. OL class equals Tynum sanitation container Lee data annotation ID equals C9AF33at42027FBC4023F463C2ECF7D3 is the first assistant minister in the cabinet and has the greatest power /Lee/OL/annotations. 35 Chapter 35 Chapter 35, Ambush and Encirclement. No one can stop it. However, with the help of the deductive system, He Chuan was always able to predict the actions of the imperial court in advance. No matter how dangerous the situation was, he could always turn the situation around. The common people gave this nameless hero a nickname, Night Slayer. As the name Night Slayer became more and more famous, something interesting happened. When some small officials bullied the people like usual, the people only had to shout, "Aren't you afraid that Night Slayer will come looking for you?" Then this official would probably hesitate for a moment before giving up on what he originally wanted to do, or even apologizing. This way, Night Slayer's fame went even higher, and the people would treat him as a guardian god against the dynasty officials. It was probably at this time. More and more martial artists went to assassinate some officials with bad conduct. As time went by, Night Slayer no longer referred to a single person, but a group. Whoever went against the dynasty and killed those corrupt officials would be a member of Night Slayer. Social status has been greatly raised, the Inspiring a Resistant Spirit achievement has been unlocked, and final evaluation points have been greatly increased. He Chuan was surprised by this result, but he was also very gratified. It seemed that the martial artists of this dynasty were not so hopeless. They were still somewhat courageous. They knew how to resist oppression and protect the weak. They did not let the whales spread throughout the land. However, they were unable to change the current situation of the people's lives for a while. This was a long and arduous road. It would take a lot of time just to clean up the people in the human trafficking chain. It had been almost a year since he left Qingyuan County, but he had only assassinated a small part of them. Of course. During this period, He Chuan did not just assassinate people. Every time he went to a new place, he would collect a large number of local martial arts techniques to perfect his tyrannical true cultivation manual. However, the high-grade cultivation manuals in this world were all mastered by the commanders of the various armies of the dynasty, so it was impossible for them to take it out easily. As a result, what he obtained were all relatively basic cultivation manuals and he could only cultivate them to the level of a second-rate martial artist at most. Even though the tyrannical true cultivation method had become more comprehensive and had no blind spots, it did not allow He Chuan to break through to the level of a first-rate martial artist. Unless, he obtained a better martial art to carry on the deduction, and researched the tyrannical true cultivation manual, upper. Then, the people on the list who were in the military camp started to have bad luck. At first, only a few adjutants and commander-in-chief had died. Later on, those military officers who had upper-rank second-rate strength, and even some deputy generals who were only half-step away from first-rate cultivators, all died mysteriously in the middle of the night. Comparing their wounds, they were all killed in one move. They didn't even have the chance to resist. Only then did they realize. Night Slayer had attacked the military officers. This was a big issue. The dynasty's greatest reliance on ruling the world was the army. You killed my high-ranking military officers, how could I manage the people? Hence, the imperial court was enraged and further increased the intensity of the arrests. But in the end, only a few third-rate martial artists were caught. They were all wandering people who had voluntarily joined the ranks of killing corrupt officials. They had no idea who the real Night Slayer was. The people from the imperial court were flustered and exasperated. They began the order to kill without mercy. These martial artists were collectively escorted to the Meridian Gate. Along with their families, wives, children, old and young, all were beheaded and displayed to the public. The imperial court even said that if the martial artists in the world dared to collude with Night Slayer again, they would all end up like this. For a time, the martial artists in the world did not dare to act rashly. However, the legend of Night Slayer did not end there. There was still one person who constantly swam in the darkness, making decisions for the common people of the entire dynasty. This was the effect that the imperial court wanted. Basically, the only person who would still go against the wind and commit crimes at this time was that Night Slayer master. The empire's cultivators in charge of arresting followed the clues all the way, predicting in advance the next general who might be assassinated and would be lying in wait nearby. In this operation, they sent out a total of 3 lower-stage first-rate experts, 1 middle-stage first-rate expert, and more than 10 late-stage second-rate experts. In addition, there were close to 1,000 well-equipped crossbowmen and archers who were blocking and attacking from afar. They were trying to kill the Night Slayer master here in this battle. In the middle of the night, the military camp was silent. Only the occasional chirping of cicadas would bring about a momentary clamor. Everyone was hiding in the dark, waiting for their target to appear. Whoosh! In the darkness, the sound of rushing wind could be heard. A figure flashed by, flying out of the bamboo forest high above, and quietly landing on a tent that was loaded with provisions. He Chuan looked around, and his gaze stopped at a few static weeds for a few seconds. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he circulated his inner chi to his legs with a faint smile, approaching the largest tent in the military camp at full speed. Just as he approached, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. Attack! At the same time as the voice sounded, a cold blade light lit up from the curtain of the tent that had just been lifted. He Chuan was already prepared. He calmly rolled back and easily dodged the attack. However, the other party did not give him any time to catch his breath. He immediately had the soldiers cover him with a rain of arrows. However, a strange scene appeared. He Chuan's figure was like a ghost as he shuttled back and forth in the dense rain of arrows. The poisoned arrows did not even cause a small wound as they were all dodged. The various experts who had successively landed and sealed off his escape routes were all dumbfounded. Was this a joke? Even if they had learned 2 top-tier movement techniques, they would not be able to dodge such a dense rain of arrows, right? Was the Night Slayer master's movement technique so good to such an extent? While they were shocked, they did not pay too much attention to it. So what if his movement technique was good? Today, there were so many first-rate and second-rate martial artists attacking at the same time. Let's see where you can run to. Kill! After the order was given, more than 10 people swarmed forward, completely disregarding the one-on-one martial artist's morals in the martial arts world. They attacked He Chuan from all directions. However, He Chuan blocked them left and right. Not only could he deal with these many attacks with ease, but he could also find the right time to counterattack in the gaps. And the strength of the counterattack was extremely great. A second-rate martial artist was slightly careless and his head was directly cut off. He was no longer qualified to attack. At first, this group of dynasty martial artists only felt that He Chuan's martial arts were not bad and his inner chi was abundant. However, after the battle continued for a period of time, his inner chi would be exhausted and he would immediately be hacked to death. However, as time passed, everyone suddenly realized that something was not right. In the chaotic battle, He Chuan was actually as slippery as a loach. The others could not even touch him. However, if they were not careful, they would be severely injured. In just a few minutes, half of the second-rate warriors that surrounded him died. Although the first-rate warriors did not suffer any casualties, they could not do anything to He Chuan either. 36 Chapter 36 Chapter 36, Promoted to First Rank. Who else? A long sword strikes from the side of your ribs. You can't dodge it in time and die from a piercing heart. Seeing the result of the deduction, He Chuan quickly reacted. Instantly, he leaned back in the posture of an iron bridge, dodging the incoming long sword. At the same time, he swung his knife backward. The opponent did not have time to react and his shoulder was instantly cut open by the Buddhist monk's knife, all the way to his waist. His body was split into two halves and fell down separately. His eyes were filled with shock. Even until his death, he still could not understand how He Chuan could accurately dodge his attack even though he was clearly not looking at him. The handle of the knife in He Chuan's hand fell to the ground and rebounded. He used this force to flip himself up and continue fighting. 4 weapons came from the front. You dodged them one by one and killed one person at the same time. When the old force was exhausted and the new force was not born, you were suddenly pierced through the abdomen by a long spear from the back. You are dead. He Chuan dodged 4 attacks in a row. After killing one person, he immediately jumped up. After taking the gene reagent and being a second-rate dual cultivator, the potential contained in his body was astonishing. This jump landed directly on the back of the martial artist holding the long spear. Clang! The Buddhist monk's knife sank into the flesh. The incomplete weapon wrapped in inner chi cut through the martial artist's bones with incomparable ease. He fell down with a confused expression. Like his companions, he had no idea how He Chuan had managed to dodge the sneak attack from behind. If this is all your strength, then I won't play with you anymore. He Chuan shook off the remaining blood stains on the Buddhist monk's knife, raised his left hand, condensed his majestic inner chi in his palm, and lightly pushed. Not good. Quickly dodge. That middle-stage first-rate martial artist shouted and retreated repeatedly. Boom. The inner chi swept out in the form of a shock wave, but the target was not them, but the ground below. In the next second, dust flew everywhere. They could no longer see He Chuan's figure clearly. Immediately after, a miserable cry came from the tent. By the time they rushed over, the commander's head had already been cut off, and fresh blood sprayed out from the wound, splattering the entire table. Damn it! Don't let him escape! The strongest martial artist shouted angrily. If they let the Night Slayer master escape, then no one would be able to survive. Kill! The scouts sent news. He Chuan had already broken through the heavy encirclement. Moreover, the escape route happened to be the weak point of their deployed troops. It was as if they knew in advance that it was the same whether they place how many people there. The cultivators were furious. By the time they caught up, he had already disappeared without a trace. They immediately panicked. If they brought this news back to the imperial capital, everyone would probably be punished. Thus, they came up with a plan. Using the strange escape route of the Night Slayer master, they boldly speculated that a spy within the imperial court must have leaked the news. This was equivalent to throwing the blame onto the imperial court. The officials of the imperial court were not as friendly as they appeared on the surface. In private, they had already been divided into countless factions fighting each other. They wished for the other party to die early so that they could profit from it. As a result, after they received this news, everyone started to take action. They tried their best to find out the fake spy. To be more precise, they were trying to prove that the spy belonged to their enemy's forces. They wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to take down their opponent in one fell swoop. Such a chaotic court gave He Chuan plenty of time to catch his breath. During this time, he continued to assassinate. As the number of officials who died at his hands grew larger and larger, the types of martial arts he collected also increased. Among them, there was no lack of martial arts that could allow one to cultivate to the level of a first-rate cultivator. It was also at this time that he stopped his assassination and returned to Qingyuan County to begin deducing the last tyrannical true cultivation manual. In 3 days, the prototype of the cultivation manual was deduced. In 5 days, it was mostly completed. In 7 days, he began to cultivate. In 10 days, he stepped into the first-rate cultivator. After becoming a first-rate cultivator, Chuan could clearly feel that something in his body had become different, but he could not tell the exact details. The most obvious manifestation was that the response from the deduction system had become faster. If I cultivate the tyrannical true cultivation manuak to perfection, will I be able to break through the shackles of a first-rate cultivator? This was what Chuan was more curious about. Unfortunately, the imperial court started to cause trouble for him again. After the internal opinions were temporarily unified, they finally decided to send troops to attack Chuan. The so-called punitive expedition was actually a carpet search. They did not know where Chuan was, so they let the army sweep over from city to city. In the end, the generals of the imperial court army in charge of this operation did not want to do this hard job without money. Hence, every place they passed, they would use the reason of eliminating evil for the people to collect large amounts of military wages and rations from the people. To put it bluntly, it was a robbery. It was just that this kind of excuse looked more like a bandit than a bandit. After this series of operations, the prestige of the Night Slayer became higher and higher. The people wished that these beasts would be taken care of by the Night Slayer one night. However, Chuan did not show up at this time. He was immersed in the world of martial arts cultivation and did not care about what happened outside. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. The imperial army's footprints covered more than half of the dynasty. They were about to arrive at Qingyuan County. The people were complaining. Their dissatisfaction with the imperial court had reached an extreme point. During this period, there were quite a number of lone-wandered cultivators who did not fear sacrificing to assassinate the head of the imperial army. The result could be imagined. That general had the strength of an upper-stage first-class cultivator. Just this alone was enough to make the vast majority of wanderer cultivators stop in their tracks. Not to mention, he also had tens of thousands of soldiers. Ordinary third-rate or even second-rate cultivators simply could not get close to him. Seeing that Night Slayers could not withstand a single blow, the Imperial Army General could not help but feel a little smug. He said that Night Slayers was a bunch of useless chickens and dogs. The so-called Night Slayer Master was just trash that was praised by others. He only knew how to bully those who were not as strong as him. If you have the guts, come to the military camp and find him. The commoners did not feel good when they heard this. But they could not say a word of rebuttal. After all, the mysterious master of Night Slayer had disappeared for a long time. They had not heard of him showing his face anywhere in the past 2 years. Then, something unexpected happened. On the same day that the leader of the Imperial Army started to spout nonsense. When the sun reaches its highest point, a young man in a black robe, holding a knife full of holes, descended from the sky like a god. In front of all the civilians, he chopped off the head of the general and threw it to the ground. I heard that you asked me to try killing you. It seems easier for me to kill you than killing a chicken. The young man had a smile on his face. He did not show any fear in front of the thousands of soldiers who were carrying standard weapons. He said each word carefully. Who else? 37 Chapter 37 Chapter 37, Who is willing to fight with me for the hope in our hearts? The people of the Imperial Army were utterly silent. Those vice-generals also had first-rate strength. Even the commandant, who had barely stepped into the first-rate level, did not dare to speak. They were afraid that they would be targeted by Chuan. It was too terrifying. He was taking the head of an enemy general among 10,000 armies as easy as taking something from a bag. Was this something that a human could do? Even an upper-stage first-rate cultivator could not do it. Could it be that this Night Slayer had already broken through the first-rate level and reached the realm of being one with nature? This was a question that arose in their hearts at the same time. If that was the case, then this Night Slayer was not an existence that they could deal with at all. Don't look at the tens of thousands of Imperial Court soldiers inside and outside the city. To a martial arts expert of this level, they were not a threat at all. Ordinary soldiers did not have any means to stop him, and it was difficult to even restrict him. The Night Slayer could kill all the generals and leave. Who would be at a disadvantage then? It would still be them. Hence, under this psychological attack, the generals of the imperial army tacitly did not dare to act rashly. No one dared to stand out. In the crowd, they silently waved to the back, signaling for them to retreat. Very soon, the thousands of imperial court soldiers in the city retreated like a tide. After meeting up with the troops outside the city, they did not hesitate and quickly moved north. However, He Chuan knew that the imperial court would not let this go. In the future, they would definitely send even stronger cultivators to encircle and suppress him. He might as well take the initiative and go against him. He Chuan stepped onto the city wall and looked down at the commoners before speaking slowly. Perhaps all of you have heard of me. Night Slayer is the nickname that the people in the world have given me. To be able to obtain your trust and recognition is my honor. In this tyrannical and corrupt dynasty, it's a pity that my personal ability is limited, and I have failed everyone's expectations. With just my strength alone, it's really hard to shake them. After saying this, he paused. The people below who were listening were a little confused and they stared at each other. What did he mean? Could it be that Night Slayer Master was afraid of the imperial court? Did he not want to continue resisting them? In the next second, He Chuan used his inner chi to wrap around his voice and sent it out. That voice filled with intimidation sounded in everyone's hearts at the same time. Today, I want to rebel. Rebel against this decadent dynasty. Rebel against this distorted era. Return a peaceful world to all the people in this world. Crush that endless oppression and evil power. Bringing all the cultivators in the world a holy land for cultivation. No matter whether they are talented or not, they will all enjoy the best cultivation. Who is willing to fight with me for the future, for the hope in their hearts? As soon as he said that, the tens of thousands of people in the city were stunned. Did I hear wrong? Night Slayer wanted to rebel? This was a great crime that would kill 9 generations. Everyone was silent. Faced with such a choice, it seemed that they would rather welcome the arrival of the light in oppression than creating the light themselves. He Chuan looked at these people with a hint of sorrow. Perhaps you haven't seen the starving people everywhere, the mournful people everywhere. Nor have you seen the bandits who colluded with the government, wantonly slaughtering unarmed civilians, and humiliating the women in their homes in front of them. It sounds far away, right? Then let's hope that they will never repeat their mistakes on you. He Chuan shook his head in disappointment and turned to leave. The instigation to revolt here was considered to have ended in failure. However, he could still go to Qingyuan County to try again. That was the place he had been running for several years. The respect the civilians had for him was perhaps greater than their fear of the imperial court. 2 days later, when He Chuan returned to Qingyuan County, countless warriors and civilians had lined up in a long line, waiting for his arrival. Welcome Night Slayer Master. It seemed that they all knew his identity. He Chuan raised his arm and called out. I want to rebel, there is no glory or wealth, only the truth of the world. Who is willing to fight with me? His short words instantly received countless responses. A middle-aged martial artist brought his family forward. The 5 members of the Sun family are willing to fight with you, sir. Good. He Chuan's gaze was sharp. With a glance, he could tell that everyone in this family was a cultivator. The weakest one was a middle-stage third-rate cultivator. Compared to ordinary soldiers, they were much stronger. Me too. A youth dressed in green and white stood out from the side. The sword on his back was more than 3 feet long. The inner chi emitted from it made him feel high-spirited. He was already a second-rate martial artist at such a young age. Ha ha ha, even a little kid relied on his courage to step forward. Do we old men still have the face to stand behind others? Amidst the hearty laughter, a few old men also walked out. He Chuan took a closer look. These few were even stronger. They were already upper-stage second-rate experts. They were only one step away from breaking through to become first-rate martial artists. With them taking the lead, the number of people responding instantly increased explosively. In an instant, the crowd responded. Not long after, the number of applicants had exceeded 30,000. Among them, 4,000 were martial artists. Although their strength was not equal, for an ordinary army, this number was already very exaggerated. With these cultivators, even if they were to fight against the 60,000 regular soldiers, they still had a considerable chance of winning. After this, He Kuan organized the military affairs. He got the blacksmiths in the city to speed up the forging of armor for them. Not long after, the resistance army officially started an uprising. Under the gaze of the people, He Chuan listed out the 10 great crimes of the dynasty. He wanted everyone to know. They were not fighting for themselves, not for power. They were fighting for the people of the world. Following this, they used Qingyuan County as their base and quickly expanded. In a short period of time, 30,000 people consecutively broke through more than 10 important imperial cities. They obtained a large number of military supplies. After the news spread to the north, the entire imperial court quavered and discussed it for a few days. In the end, they actually decided to transfer 300,000 troops over to suppress the rebellion. 38 Chapter 38 Chapter 38, 30,000 against 300,000. One man can hold the pass. Duel with the fourth in the world. Northern Border Legion. This was an elite legion that fought against the barbarians all year round. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the number one legion of the dynasty. Even if they fought against the guards stationed in the capital that enjoyed the most military expenditure, they had a 60% chance of winning. 300,000 elites versus 30,000 newly formed soldiers. One could imagine the result. No one was optimistic about the resistance army. When the Northern Border Legion approached, even He Chuan's troops started to feel uneasy. No one expected that the first true battle would be a decisive battle. If they won, the dynasty would have no legion that could fight them. However, if they lost, under such a situation, it was inevitable that someone would suggest to He Chuan to retreat to the border and leave the territory of the dynasty to develop before making a move. He Chuan rejected it outright. If we retreat today and take a step back, once we leave our homes, when will we be able to return? When will we see the day when the world is united? So what if they are elites? So what if they have more people? Those who fight for that shameless dynasty that only seek personal gain, even if they have great strength, they can only use half of it. We, the righteous army, are with millions of common people, why should we be afraid of them? After saying these words, everyone clenched their fists and was filled with energy once again. The next day, the Northern Border Legion arrived in the city. They were shouting to persuade them to surrender. He Chuan did not say anything and charged forward alone. He raised the sword in his hand. His majestic inner chi swept out, and there was no one who could match him. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people fell under the sword intent. It slashed through half of the front line. The Northern Border Legion soldiers on the front line did not expect such a fierce person to suddenly appear. They did not dare to go forward to deal with him. As a result, He Chuan was like a god who had descended to earth and charged into the middle of the 300,000 Northern Border Legion's main forces. The resistance army's blood boiled when they saw this. They all roared, "Kill!" A few thousand cultivators took the lead and charged into the formation, slashing wildly. The ordinary soldiers at the back followed. They used their longbows to throw arrows. The rain of arrows covered an even further area to stop the enemy's reinforcements from charging forward. The terrain here was narrow and the roads were blocked by mountains on both sides. There was no way for the army of 300,000 to rush forward. As a result, the tens of thousands of Northern Border Legion soldiers at the front became rootless duckweed and were killed by a group of powerful cultivators. Was it difficult for 4,000 cultivators to kill tens of thousands of people? It was not difficult at all. Even the weakest third-rate cultivator could kill well-equipped soldiers in just a few breaths' time. In the end, the Northern Border Legion's front line was instantly defeated and they retreated one after another. But at this time, the sound of war drums sounded. The marshal gave the order. Very soon, the surrounding heavy shield army formations changed direction one after another and blocked the charging cultivators. However, the rear was still in chaos. He Chuan's individual strength was really too strong. After he cultivated the tyrannical true cultivation manual to perfection, he had already surpassed the boundary of a first-rate martial artist. He could be said to be unrivaled in the world. No matter how elite the Northern Border Legion was, they would not be a match for him. Unless he was exhausted and did not even have the strength to kill. However, at this moment, a loud shout suddenly sounded in the sky. Enough! He Chuan narrowed his eyes and swept the Buddhist monk's knife in his hand with great force. A crisp sound was heard. There was another gap on the Buddhist monk's knife. This was the performance of the opponent breaking through the inner chi attached to the weapon. This kind of situation only appeared when he was still weak, when he was killing the bandits. Oh! He Chuan stopped. Such an opponent was worthy of him knowing his name before killing him. The opponent did not continue to attack. The two of them looked at each other telepathically. You are Night Slayer. The person who came wore armor that was full of traces of killing. His eyes were sharp. I have long heard of your strength in the northern border. Seeing you today, you are indeed extraordinary. You're not bad either. He Chuan said calmly. This attitude made the other party frown slightly. I think you're a talent, you shouldn't do such a stupid thing. Why don't you give up your weapons and surrender? I can guarantee your life in the imperial court. Stupid thing. He Chuan laughed lightly. You know what the imperial court is like today. How can you say that overthrowing them was a stupid thing? Looks like I can't persuade you anymore. On the battlefield, weapons are used to determine who is superior. Forget it. The other party sighed and slowly raised the long spear in his hand. I, Marshal Fan Long, will not kill nameless people. Quickly report your name. So you are the ranked 4th expert on the dynasty cultivators ranking. No wonder you have such a big mouth. He Chuan smiled. You want to know my name? Beat me first. Humph. Fan Long stopped talking and attacked. The surrounding soldiers made room for the two of them early on. They retreated a few hundred meters and entered spectator mode. It's been a long time since the marshal made a move. How many moves do you think this Night Slayer can withstand? This kid is too young, it's already not bad if he can withstand 2 moves. I bet 3 moves, that kid didn't even take a deep breath when he charged in. He definitely didn't use his full strength. Do you guys think the marshal won't be able to beat him? Ouch! Why did you hit me? I'm trying to wake you up. How many barbarian leaders did the marshal kill on the northern border? Did you forget that he killed 10 first-rate experts by himself? That's right, the marshal's killing this Night Slayer is purely bullying a child. Didn't you see that kid's hair hasn't even grown yet? The conversation came to an abrupt end. Because the victor had already been decided on the battlefield. In just 10 moves, Fan Long, whom they regarded as the undefeatable marshal, had already fallen to He Chuan's feet. Now, there was a huge wound on his chest. Fresh blood flowed out. Fan Long's eyes were filled with disbelief. Such a young cultivator actually defeated him in such a short time? How was this possible? But that was the reality. He Chuan looked at him calmly. You have some ability, but that's all. Under the circumstances of possessing a tyrannical true cultivation manual, he was an invincible existence in the same realm. Not to mention having a deduction system, he would be informed of any threatening attacks at any time. Fan Long's loss was not unjustified. "I've lost, kill me." His face was filled with loneliness. He did not expect to die in such a place today. He heard that Night Slayer was a chivalrous person. Losing to him was not considered losing his reputation. However, He Chuan did not make a move. Fan Long was known as a good general in the northern border. He treated his subordinates with kindness and sincerity. The soldiers who died in battle were given double compensation. If the imperial court did not give enough, he would even pay out of his own pocket. More importantly, his name was not on the list of human trafficking. "I won't kill you, surrender so that you won't harm these soldiers and brothers." 39 Chapter 39 Chapter 39, Not Surrendering? One palm to settle the world. Surrendering? This was undoubtedly an insult to a general. Furthermore, surrendering now meant going against the dynasty in the future. It was no different from rebelling. Fan Long could not accept both. "Soldiers do not surrender." Fan Long looked at He Chuan deeply. "Moreover, I'm the only one who lost. The Northern Border Legion hasn't been defeated yet, and your 30,000 resistance army isn't even strong enough. When they're all dead and injured, you won't be able to kill all 300,000 Northern Territory cavalry. Enough people have already died." He Chuan sighed softly. "Since you won't give up, I'll let you experience it." Fan Long's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment, he suddenly felt the power in his body tremble involuntarily. It was as if he had met a unique king and was making a submission gesture. He Chuan closed his eyes and slowly opened his arms. Immediately, the energy in the air resonated with each other and gradually interweaved into a storm vortex with an extremely strong aura. It lifted his body up and headed high into the sky under everyone's gaze. For a moment, the wind and clouds changed. The dark cumulonimbus clouds were blown by the strong wind and covered the originally bright sky. Rumble! Along with the deafening thunder, the battle below stopped. Everyone couldn't help but raise their heads and look up at the figure in the center of the vortex. Is this the power that the top cultivators possess? Countless soldiers looked forward to it. But as the saying goes, the layman watches the show, while the expert watches the door. In the arena, only Fan Long's strength was closest to the peak of a cultivator. He clearly knew where the limit of a first-rate cultivator was. After seeing this scene, he couldn't be more shocked in his heart. He was completely stunned. How is this possible? This isn't the power that a cultivator can have. Night Slayer, how did he do it? Whether a cultivator cultivated internally or externally, they would always rely on external forces to strengthen themselves. No matter what, they would never be able to break through the shackles of their physical bodies. They would not be able to walk through the air and injure others through the air. However, Night Slayer had broken this common sense. It was as if he had mastered the power of heaven and earth, and he had triggered the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. He had clearly done nothing but float in mid-air, yet he was able to give everyone an irresistible pressure. It was difficult for them to even catch their breath. Moreover, this feeling grew stronger with He Chuan's actions. At this moment, He Chuan spoke. He was like a god, his voice was like thunder, and every word was clearly heard in everyone's minds. "You are all soldiers of the northern border, and you have contributed greatly to the resistance of the barbarians. I do not wish to commit any more murders. Surrender, and you will live. Fight, and you will die." He Chuan raised his hand high, opened his eyes, and suddenly pressed down. Instantly, everyone felt as if their bodies were weighed down by 1,000 tons. It was as if a huge mountain was pressing down on their heads. Not to mention gasping for breath, even moving was difficult. Along with the pressure formed by the storm, many soldiers who did not have martial cultivation started to have physical reactions. One by one, they fell to the ground and fainted. In the blink of an eye, half of the 300,000 soldiers were destroyed. and the 30,000 soldiers of the resistance happened to be watching this scene from afar outside the storm. Everyone was excited. Damn it! It was so exciting to rebel with Lord He. No wonder he was so confident. He was completely unafraid of these 300,000 elite soldiers of the northern border. So he had such a move. Now, let alone 300,000. Even if 3 million people came, they would have to kneel down to them. Meanwhile, He Chuan continued to pressure them from high up in the sky. Fan Long. The life and death of your brothers are all in your hands. If you don't make a choice, they will soon suffocate to death. When Fan Long heard this, his heart was extremely conflicted. Choosing between treason and the lives of 300,000 soldiers. It was undoubtedly a very painful matter. He silently recalled the things he had heard about the Night Slayer when he was guarding the border in the Northern Territory. He helped the weak and devoted himself to the people. He could be said to be a hero. It was not impossible for him to surrender like that. At least, it was not considered aiding the tyrant. All right. I surrender. Fan Long gritted his teeth. However, I have one condition. Speak. He Chuan immediately stopped and heaved a sigh of relief. If Fan Long did not agree, he would not be able to hold on for long. I cannot bring the Northern Border Legion along with you to attack the Imperial Court. I agree. He Chuan retracted his aura and slowly dropped as he flew down from the sky. The storm energy that swept across the battlefield also dissipated bit by bit. The remaining people who were still conscious felt their bodies become lighter and regained their ability to move normally. Seeing He Chuan return to the ground, everyone could not help but take a few steps back. This young man was too terrifying. Fan Long also showed respect. He took out the Commander Tiger Tally and solemnly handed it to He Chuan. I hope you'll keep your word. I cross my heart. He Chuan laughed lightly and said a joke that ruined his temperament. Fan Long could not help but laugh. The animosity and awkwardness between the two were resolved with this laugh. The next day, the news that 300,000 elites were captured by the 30,000 resistance army spread out. Within a few days, they reached every corner of the dynasty. Instantly, all the civilians and cultivators were shocked. No one had expected that the side that could not win would actually capture half of the Northern Border Legion at the cost of minimal casualties. This caused many people to have more confidence in the resistance army, and they all pledged their allegiance. In just half a month's time, the scale of the resistance army had increased several times, reaching 200,000 people. When the imperial court received the news, they were even more furious. They scolded Fan Long for being useless. They had thrown in so many elites of the dynasty. In the end, Fan Long actually returned to the capital at this time and requested to enter the palace to meet the emperor. Furthermore, he came as an envoy of the resistance army. This was undoubtedly a slap to everyone's face. However, the news that they brought was very useful. The general content was that the leader of the resistance army did not want to increase the number of deaths, causing the people to die. He didn't want the soldiers who were supposed to protect the country to die in this meaningless war. Hence, he proposed to fight with the people on the dynasty cultivators' rankings. He wanted to end this conflict by fighting with the top powers. As for how to respond to this topic, the imperial court was split into two factions. One faction advocated peace talks. After analyzing the situation, they felt that fighting would harm the interests of the dynasty. The other faction wanted to continue fighting. After some discussion, the representative of the faction that wanted to fight, the senior Grand Secretary, appeared and pretended to agree. However, he turned around and assassinated Fan Long in the dark. Furthermore, he sent out 3 legions from the east, west, and south to gather all the troops and kill in the area where the main force of the resistance army was. 40 Chapter 40 Chapter 40, the third in the world? Keep killing. Senior Grand Secretary, the instigator behind human assault and trafficker. Soon, the news of the million powerful armies pressuring the border was spread to everyone's ears through the scouts. The resistance army was ready. The 500,000 did not show any signs of retreating. There were only 200,000 people originally. But now, there were 300,000 people from the Northern Border Legion. In the beginning, He Chuan had followed Fan Long's request and did not plan to let this group of people participate in the battle. But who would have thought that the imperial court would actually kill Fan Long, who was the envoy? The two armies cannot kill the envoy when they fought. This was the principle that everyone adhered to. Now that the imperial court was so unreasonable, it directly ignited the anger of the 300,000 soldiers of the Northern Border Legion. Now, each and every one of them harbored hatred in their hearts. They howled and wanted to kill their way back to the capital to take revenge for the marshal. However, He Chuan did not want to fight head-on with the imperial army anymore. His own people knew their own affairs. The combat strength of these 500,000 people was still very limited, and they were not well adjusted enough. They were definitely not a match for the millions of soldiers. It was even more unrealistic to let him fight on his own. Although the method he used to suppress the Northern Border Legion could be replicated, the effect would definitely not reach the same level. After all, he had only used his skilled control of inner chi to trigger the energy contained in the surrounding air to form a collision storm. There was a pressure difference with the storm vortex. After the pressure became lower, it was naturally difficult for them to breathe. When the oxygen supply was insufficient, those ordinary soldiers without cultivation would definitely faint because of it. The truth was far from being as magical as they had imagined. As for the thunder, it was just a coincidence that there were cumulonimbus clouds nearby and they were sucked over. He Chuan had completely taken advantage of this group of people's lack of scientific knowledge and deified himself, forcing these people to be in awe of him. But the price was the rapid loss of inner chi. It would be very difficult to hold on for a while, not to mention increasing the range of the storm when facing a million-strong army. Thus, this path simply could not be taken. Through the deductive system, he also learned that if this method was used, the probability of defeating the imperial army was less than 10%. Thus, He Chuan changed his train of thought. It was better to take advantage of the main force of the imperial army going out to attack the rebel army. He would directly rush to the capital to steal home. You won't agree to a martial duel with me, right? Very good, I'll directly knock on your door and pick you all out one by one. He Chuan had always been a person who think of many things and did things quickly. After confirming his target, he did not say anything else. In the shortest amount of time, he single-handedly charged into the capital and rushed to the home of the senior Grand Secretary, the main culprit of the pro-war faction. In the backyard garden, a dignified-looking man was leaning against the arms of a few beautiful women. He hugged them from left to right and reached into their clothes to caress them without any hesitation. Day sex? Dong Chao, you're even more of a bastard than I thought. He Chuan leaped and landed in front of the pavilion and said something casually. He said the name of the senior Grand Secretary to test the other party's reaction. In the end, that person did not even look at him. He waved his hand, and the beauty next to him sipped a small glass of wine, then leaned over and kissed him. As their lips and tongues interweaved, the wine slid into the mouth through the gap. That person's face revealed a satisfied expression, and the strength of his hand increased a little, causing the beauty to involuntarily cry out. Her dress slid down with her movements, revealing her fair and graceful body. However, even though He Chuan, an outsider, had seen her naked, she did not show any signs of shyness. As if she was used to this situation, she reached out to untie the man's upper body, lowered her head, and used her tongue to tease his chest, which had become bare. The man enjoyed the beauty's service and closed his eyes in satisfaction. People live in this world for three things: greed, lust, and life. In this life, I don't lack anything. I just want to live longer and have more fun. What a pity, many people want me to die, but I don't want to die. What should I do? Hee hee. Then I have to let them die. He suddenly opened his eyes and slowly looked at He Chuan, Night Slayer, right? You do have some ability to subdue Fan Long, but it's not enough for a young man to have some ability. You also need to understand what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Forget it, you should learn a lesson in this life and only talk about this wrong thing after you die. As his voice fell, a shadow flashed past like lightning. In just the blink of an eye, a person was standing between He Chuan and that man. To come uninvited, isn't that too impolite? There was a long scar on his face, as ugly as a maggot. He sneered, "Oh, I almost forgot, you are a stealthy person, you only know how to sneak attack and assassinate, naturally you don't care about manners." "Sir, you spoke in a strange tone, could it be that you are a eunuch?" He Chuan's expression did not change. He mocked mercilessly, "Tisk, I really can't believe that the ranked 3 expert in the world is not a man." "You?" The scar-faced man's expression suddenly changed. It was as if he had really hit a sore spot. He immediately wanted to attack and kill this young man who spoke rudely in front of him with one palm. But in the next moment, a powerful hand grabbed the right wrist joint that he was about to attack. Then, he twisted it fiercely. Crack! A clear sound rang out. The wrist was broken from the bone. Even the skin and flesh were exposed, revealing the pale bones inside. The scar-faced man was greatly shocked. How was this possible? How could this young man's actions be faster than his own? However, the moment this thought was born, He Chuan's hand was already placed on his neck. "In the next life, don't be a two-sided person." This was the last sentence he heard. Then, his vision went black. He lost his perception of the world. Screams sounded. Several beauties panicked. The man lying in the beauty's arms also panicked. He looked at everything in a daze. The third most powerful warrior in the world was so weak? How could it be? But the truth was, He Chuan was like the Grim Reaper, approaching step by step. Even if he was not a warrior, he could clearly feel the murderous intent emanating from his body. He is the instigator of the human trafficking chain. If you can order him around, then you must be the mastermind, right? Dong Chao. He Chuan raised his hand again. "Wait!" Dong Chao shouted, "What do you want? Money? Women? Or this world? I can get it for you as long as you don't kill me. It's a very tempting choice, but unfortunately, it's not what I want." Anno data annotation ID equals 00472D7590828407994F4BA28FCA5614. He Chuan did not slow down at all. He placed one hand in front of his chest and pressed down hard, /Anno. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. Under the terrifying gazes of the few beauties who had already curled up in the corner, Dong Chao's heart was taken out by him. However, the connecting blood vessels were not broken. He took out the heart and placed it on the collapsed chest, letting Dong Chao struggle and tremble. The methods are a little cruel, but it seems that letting you die like this is still a little unworthy of the girls who were killed by you. He Chuan said this to himself. He took out his Buddhist monk's knife and took turns cutting his hands and feet, breaking the tendons on Dong Chao's hands and feet. Now, you can only watch as your blood dries up bit by bit. You can only feel that your chest is getting heavier and heavier, and it's getting harder and harder for you to breathe. You're dying bit by bit in despair, but you can't struggle. He Chuan recalled the scenes that he had witnessed in the grass temple village. A relieved smile appeared on his face. "Senior Grand Secretary, when you did those bad things, did you ever think that there would be such a day?" Annotation style equals display, none, OL class equals Tinem sanitation container Lee data annotation ID equals 00472D7590828407994F4BA28FCA5614 content warning, abuse, excessive or gratuitous violence, death, bloody scene. I just hope people will see this warning, /lee/ol/annotations. That's it for this batch of chapters. If you enjoyed the story, stick around for more. Subscribe and join me in exploring even more light novel worlds. Have a favorite novel you'd love to hear? Share your suggestions, and you might see them in the listener's choice section. See you in the next one.